Why the fuck? Oh, did I? Hope everyone's doing great today. Today is July 20th, 2023. You know. Yeah, didn't really get a chance to stream at all really last week or even like really this week either. Um, just been fairly busy lately. um, yeah, so we're gonna be covering a lot of shit that's been going on with like the conservatives today, like over the last like a week or so. Because like they've just been completely unhinged recently. Um, as well as like we'll be covering a little bit of the BC port strike as well. Yeah. And this will tie into like the conservative grift or whatever, with the with the landfill updates. So that's gonna be fun. Um, so I guess we'll just get right into it. Cause I need to. Yeah, there's a decent amount to cover. Starting off with, we're gonna start off with the port strikes with in BC. So for those who don't know, the union representing the port workers are going on or decided to vote on going on strike. And yeah, we're gonna talk about that starting off. Then we'll get into like some of the conservative shit. So, understandably, the workers are on strike again. So we'll start off with a couple posts. One from the National Post, one from CBC, one from CTV, and off again. On again, strike that was threatening to disprute billions of dollars in trade flow through Vancouver's port is off again after the union rescinded a 20 or a 72-hour strike notice that would have sent workers to the picket lines on Saturday. Uh, in brief, in a brief note to its member locals, the International Longshore Warehouse Union Canada says that effective immediately, the strike notice dated on July 22nd at 9 a.m. has been removed. They went able and found an agreement or something. My best guess. BC Maritime Employers Association says it's been made aware of the latest notice and was seeking clarification on of what that means for a possible strike action. With the 72-hour strike notice removed, the union can't resume strike actions unless it files another notice. After ending a 13-day strike last week, which think we I think we covered like the start of it, right? Last time, right? No, I can't remember. I think we did. Um, uh, yeah, after ending a 13-day strike last week with a uh, mandated settlement, port workers went back to the picket line late Thursday, rejecting the mandate settlement as insufficient. In a statement, the unions said the 4-year deal was too long of a time period. The mediators recommended settlement offered members no long-term protection. The ILWU, Canada Longshore Caucus, does does not believe the recommendations had the ability to protect our jobs now or into the future. That new job action was cut short on Wednesday when the Canada Industrial Relations Board ruled the news strike was illegal. I mean, it's not fucking surprising that they try to rule that it's illegal because, like, the thing is, right, when it comes to striking, the workers don't generally want to strike. It's usually, like we've talked about this time and time again on the broadcast, it's always a last resort option, right? They only do so when, if they decide to vote on strike and, because, like, they're getting a fucking bad deal. Like, keep in mind, right, that keep in mind that there are two sides to the strike, right? There's that can put an end to the strike. There's the workers, accepting a deal, provided they get one. But, if the deal is complete and utter dog shit, I don't blame them for not wanting to accept that deal. And there's also the bosses on top of that. The bosses can easily be like, yeah, no, we'll listen to your reasonable demands and, we'll put an end to the strike. But that doesn't happen. Right? Like, this shit does not surprise me at all. Right? It was illegal because it did not come with a new 24 or 72-hour warning. The board ordered the union to have its members return to the job. The union respected the decision, but issued a new strike notice with workers set to hit the picket lines on Saturday before rescinding the notice late on Wednesday evening. This, like, just happened too. The union is now expected to send the settlement vote to a vote. If the strike restarts, it will leave the government with few options to end a dispute that is costing the economy billions every week. On Wednesday, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau convinced the government's indecent response groups to discuss the labor conflict. The response group, made up of cabinet ministers and senior officials, is described as only being convented at times of national crisis or to discuss events with major implications in Canada, which, I'm kind of not surprised that they would consider that as, like, a major implication, right? The response group made the The meeting comes as the federal government faces increasing pressure to bring back to work legislation, with industry groups warning of continued impacts on the economy if a strike is allowed to resume. Honestly, like if they fucking vote on back to work legislation, like honestly, fuck them, right? Oh, what the going on? Back up. Oh. Okay. But yeah, no, like back to work legislation, like fucking, it just hurts the economy even more, right? Well, not necessarily actually, um, but it's like severely anti-working class, and it's completely fucking ridiculous, right? Like, I imagine that their fucking demands are very, very reasonable because usually they are. Because usually they want things like, say, job security and better benefits and better working conditions and usually better pay as well. But like, the media will always like make it out to be like, oh, they just want more fucking money. Which, yeah, everyone wants more money to a certain extent, right? But when it comes down to things, you know, it ultimately doesn't really matter because like the wage increase is like very reasonable. On social media, Federal Minister of Labor Simon O'Regan called the strike illegal, which, not surprised, even the fucking liberals are very like anti-labor though. So, and in a joint statement with Trudeau, or Transport Minister Omar uh, Agabra said they were considering all options to bring the strike to a close. Or you could just fucking meet with the workers and, you know, give in to their fairly reasonable demands, right? Like, it's just so fucking stupid. We have been patient. We have respected the collective bargaining process, but we need our ports operating, the two ministers said. I mean, this is just fucking performative, man. They don't give a shit. The leadership of the International Longshore and Warehouse Unions rejected the offer before it had been put to a full vote of membership. Under the Canada Labour Code, O'Regan can force leadership to put the offer to a full vote. The government could also bring back to work legislation to resolve the impasse, but it would have provided a 48-hour notice to its intention to recall Parliament. And as of Wednesday afternoon, multiple sources in different political parties told the National Post that had not taken place. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre called the government to step up and resolve the strike quickly. He said the Liberals' efforts so far have failed. I mean, yeah, but like, what you want, like, what fucking what fucking Millhouse wants is he wants he's essentially saying, you know, if you force back to work legislation, we will pass it with you. Like, that's essentially what he's saying, right? Because like every other single fucking like grifter that's on the right, or just like any other fucking conservative that pretends to give a shit about the working class, you know, he doesn't give a shit about these workers. Like he would honestly rather have them like fucking starve to death, right? Um, which, yeah, you know, the federal liberal government has been pretty dog shit when it comes down to revolving like any form of labor disputes, but a lot of that also is like, well, I guess it depends on if they're federal or provincial workers, but like a lot of the just a lot of like the premiers and like uh or like provincial strikes, or strikes that, you know, are like provincial issues, like even they haven't fucking resolved them. Like, take a look at like what the fuck happened with Doug Ford, for example. Like, come on. Justin Trudeau must do his job and end this strike immediately because of the massive cost to workers, consumers, and businesses. We're calling on him to deliver a plan to end the strike within the next 24 hours. He wants back to work legislation passed. That's what he wants. Keep that in mind. Greater Vancouver Board and Trade President and CEO Bridget Anderson said the port strike was causing serious reputational damage. We urge the government to do whatever it can to make sure this ends swiftly and we get the port back up and running again. Again, I'm not really surprised. Messaging me. Ugh. Yeah, keep in mind that they want this person, or that, you know, they also want the fucking back to work legislation in as well. The Board of Trade and has estimated the strike's current cost of at $10 billion with backlogs that could take months to clear. A report in 2023 from the World Bank and S&P Global Market Intelligence found the Port of Vancouver second from the bottom of the international ranking of efficiency, with ships occasionally waiting weeks to be offloaded. I'm sure there's more than just the fucking strikes do with that. Hold on, I gotta take a look at something. Ay, Fraser Johnson, a professor who focuses on supply chains at the Ivey School of Business, said the Port of Vancouver is essential to Canada's economy. He has its he said it's the 800-pound gorilla, the country's trade manufacturer. um it is 43% of all the cargo that is shipped into Canada. If you take the next five largest ports and combine them, they're about the same size as a port of Vancouver. He said. Johnson said larger companies can and will look to larger ports, but smaller businesses waiting on important deliveries often don't have that luxury, he said. The longer this goes on, the more problems it will create, including driving up the prices of products, wait to be unloaded. Now, the funny thing about this, right, is that this port strike, a lot of the, a lot of like shit that comes through here, like a lot of companies are going to just like use this as a reasoning to jack up prices, right? Like, it wouldn't be fucking surprising if they don't, like, if they increase their prices even more so that they get more fucking profit out of it, right? Like, I'm expecting it to happen, to be perfectly honest. I don't see it not happening. I don't understand the government. I don't think the government wants something else that is putting price pressure on consumer products and driving up inflation. Yeah, sure, that's what's fucking driving up inflation. Really not the fucking greed of billionaires, right? The union representing the port workers in BC says it has withdrawn its a 72-hour strike notice that has been sparked that had sparked concerns. The province ports could be shutting down again by Saturday. The withdrawal is effective immediately. International Longshore and Warehouse Union Canada President Rob Ashton said in a news release around 4 p.m. Wednesday. Earlier that morning, the ILWU served the BC Maritime Employers Association with a 72-hour strike notice starting at 9 a.m. PT, starting Saturday morning after a Tuesday job action was ruled illegal by BC Port, and BC Port workers were ordered back to work. The union, like, the funny thing is, right, is like, this is the entire point of a strike, right? The entire point of a strike is to stop production or whatever they're doing, right? And, like, stop production or whatever, and, do, and, like, want, and, like, make demands, right? Like, I fucking hate how anti-worker this goddamn country is. Like, I swear to God, like, it's like every single time we cover anyone who's fucking striking, whether it be the port workers, whether it be the teachers, whether it be the rail workers, it's always the exact same fucking shit we hear time and time again, right? Just like, oh, they need to get back to work. Oh, they those that are on the picket line should just suck it up and, fucking do whatever with, like, the nonsensical, and give in to the nonsensical demands that the fucking employers are giving. Like, this is just ridiculous, right? Like, it happens every single goddamn time. And, like, the fact that, like, fucking conservatives and like even liberals for that matter are like siding with you know, not siding with, you know, those that are on strike is just completely fucking stupid, right? Because like especially like conservatives I don't really get, considering that they tend to claim like I'm talking about I'm not talking about representatives, I'm talking about workers, right? Like it just doesn't make sense like for someone for people who claim that they care about, you know, their fellow workers, right? They're very like anti fucking strike and anti fucking union, which makes no sense, right? Like cuz like, you know, unions aren't like a left or right thing, right? It's not a left or right issue. It's an issue of fairness, right? Like if initial if the initial negotiations fall through and they decide to vote on striking, which is usually their last option, they they will you know, and they'll go on strike. Like unions aren't unions are about fairness. Like keep that in mind, guys. The union said it does so or did so in hope of returning to the bargaining table, and it regrets the economic impact of the dispute that previously shut down BC ports for 13 days at the start of the month, stalling cargo worth billions. In a statement Wednesday afternoon, the BCMEA said the canceled strike notice shows that the situation continued to be fluid and unpredictable. No, that's not true. And that it would communicate with stakeholders once clarification is received. I really fucking hate liberal capitalist media. Like, oh my god, I fucking hate it because like it's so anti-union, it's so anti-worker. It's just like, come on, bro. The members of the ILWU returned to the picket lines Tuesday afternoon after the union rejected a tentative mandate deal. The union said the four-year term of mediator's response or mediator's proposed agreement was far too long, and employers have not addressed the cost of living issue faced by workers in the last few years. Like, this is understandable, right? Because like Vancouver is the most expensive place to live in Canada, right? And unfortunately, the fucking NDP premier doesn't like the provincial NDP in BC aren't fucking doing anything about that, because keep in mind, guys, that cost of or housing and cost of living and shit, right? Like some of it is federal, right, for sure, but there is also, you know, like the housing thing, right, which is a provincial thing. Um, However, workers are forced to return to work after the Canada Institutional Relations Board ruled that the strike was unlawful and the union had not issued a 72-hour strike notice. Federal Minister Simon O'Ryan called the renewed strike action illegal after the CIRBS decision. I really hate liberals, man. God, they're so fucking bad. A spokesperson for Orion's office said Wednesday that they had received the union's notice. The strike action would not resume, and workers would go back to the job on Thursday. And said they hope it means the union will ratify a tentative deal put forward by the federal mediator. I mean, it depends on what the federal mediator is actually going to give them, right? Because if it doesn't address anything that the unions want, right, they're going to be going back out. Because, like, the workers are the ones that are going to fucking vote on it, right? In a settlement Wednesday morning, Union President Bob Ashton, here's a fucking loser, I'll tell you that much. Like, I shit you not, his new fucking appearance looks like an AI-generated Republican lawmaker from Texas. Oh. Union President Rob Ashton said the union's caucus was not satisfied with the mediators deal, met a membership goal, and directed a bargaining committee to seek a negotiation agreement. The BCME the BCMEA said the union rejected the deal without sending it to a full membership vote. By late morning, picket lines had disappeared from the BCMEU dispatch center near the port of Vancouver, and trucks were seen sporadically coming in and out of the port facilities. The BCME or MEA, saying MEU, I don't fucking know. Said the board's decision came to late dispatch workers for Wednesday's 8 a.m. shift. It said workers at the Vancouver's Inner Harbor were scheduled for return for their 1 a.m. shift on Thursday, while work was scheduled to resume in other port areas, including Prince Rupert, on Wednesday afternoon. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau convened a crisis cabinet committee Wednesday in response to the workers announcing they would resume the strike that had dispatched Canada's supply chain since July 1st, according to a government source with knowledge of the matter. Trudeau's office confirmed that the incident response group was meeting to discuss the situation in British Columbia's ports. In the Prime Minister's official interior Wednesday, CBC is not naming the source because they were not authorized to speak publicly. The move underscores the importance of the importance being attached to the dispute, with the response group only convened at times of national crisis or to discuss events with major implications for Canada. Consisting of cabinet ministers and senior officials, it has previously been convened over events including the start of COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, blockades associated with the truck convoy protests last year, and the short-lived rebellion in Russia last month. More than 7,400 workers from the ILWU originally originally walked off the job from July 1st to July 13th. Oh, I actually think we did cover this, like when it initially happened, right? Over issues including port automation, which is a legitimate fear for sure. Like automation, and AI, like we're also seeing, like, as we covered the writer's strike in Hollywood back when that was starting to happen. They were also concerned about similar things, but in the form of AI, right? And automation is understandably like the same when it comes down to that, right? Like, you know, when it comes down to things, like, I don't have a problem with AI, right? Or AI or automation, right? Because, like, those are supposed to make supposed to make jobs easier for people, right? But as we see time and time again with any form of capitalism, whether it be like private or even public, in the case of a very capitalist government, it ends up displacing a fuck ton of workers. And the biggest concern that a lot of those workers have is that they don't have any form of good social safety nets to fall back on, right? Like, the only thing that you could really technically argue that we have is public health care, right? But even that is being undermined by conservatives, right? Because, like I said, every single fucking conservative in this country is just a goddamn American. Like, they just want to be Americans, right? But, you know, if we actually had better social safety nets, like, say, Denmark, who has their ports, if I'm not mistaken, fully automated, you know, people will be less worried about it, right? Because that means that people can go and get an education, you know, find a better paying job, or even pursue their passions, right? But that doesn't exist here in Canada. We're basically just diet America, pretty much, right? The strike froze billions of dollars worth of cargo from moving in and out of harbors, including at Canada's busiest port in Vancouver. O'Regan and Transport Minister Omar Alghabra have said workers and employers across Canada cannot face further disruption, and that they were looking at all options. The ministers said they have been patient and respected the collective bargaining process, but they need the ports operating. BC Premier Dave Eby expressed dismay at the developments. I mean, at least he's taking, like, some form of stance, right? But, like, they haven't really been too terrible when it comes down to it. Like, they have other issues, like that one incident with that other individual who was trying to run for premier within their own party and ended up fucking, like, kicking her out due to, like, some stupid shit, right? I don't remember the exact details of the story, of that story. I know we did coverage of it. It is profoundly disappointing to see what we're back where we were before, but I can't help but feel that whenever the separating the parties is not worth this disruption. I've got to get it sorted out at the table as quickly as possible, he said at an unrelated news conference Wednesday. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has said Trudeau must end the strike immediately because of the massive cost to workers and consumers and businesses. He's such a fucking grifter, man. Like the worst fucking... He's like the most fucking normal crypto bro. Like, I swear to God. NDP transport critic Taylor Barach said it's a part of the union bargaining rights to be able to reject an agreement. And it absolutely is. Like, you know, it 100% is. Calls for Ottawa to pass back to work legislation to end the strike have come from the Canadian Cabinet of Commerce and the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, which, yeah, I'm not surprised that, like, the Chamber of Commerce and the Federation of Independent Business is trying to fucking push for that, because, like, those are inherently very capitalist institutions, right? So, like, they don't care. What was I? The 13-day strike had already done significant damage to small businesses across the country, and Canada's international reputation as a dependable trade partner. CFIB Executive Vice President Warney Coleman said in a statement. But, like, I honestly don't really give a shit what this person thinks. Like, I don't care, right? Because, like, the thing is like, if the government was more than willing to go to the table, negotiate, and give in to their reasonable demands, right? Like, this would be a non-issue. But as we've seen time and time again, you know, they don't care, right? Like, a lot of what the Conservatives are doing is just performative so that they can try and get fucking votes, but it doesn't fucking matter because they're just fucking, like, dog shit. Ebby said, replying on Ottawa to bring back to work legislation would not be a quick solution. No, it wouldn't be. And he's absolutely right. Like, it solves nothing. A short and intermediate term solution is not federal legislation and counting on the minority parliament in Ottawa to step in, he said. Yeah, but it doesn't matter because, like, the conservatives are, like, very anti-working class, despite, trying to seem like they are working class. Like, they'll vote for back-to-work legislation because they don't give a shit. Like, liberals play it up too. They just don't care. The parties need to accept the responsibility that they have with on both sides to come to the table in good faith and solve this for Canadians quickly. Yeah. Yeah, I don't really feel like reading an article of that because, like, we're just gonna hear more like anti-union, anti-labor shit going on with it and being like, oh, it's costing Canada billions of dollars, despite the fact that's literally the fucking point of, like, any form of labor action within like anywhere, right? Like, that's the whole fucking idea.
We begin on the ground in Vancouver, where the CBC's Georgie Smythe is at the port. So, Georgie, there's been a lot of activity over the week. What's going on there right now?
Yes, there have been developments aplenty in the Port of Vancouver today. Port workers were striking from late yesterday until early this morning when those picket lines came back down after the Canada Industrial Relations Board ruled that the work stoppage was unlawful because the union hadn't provided a 72-hour work stoppage notice. That's a decision the union is now appealing. But let me step out of the shot here and you can take a look at Canada's largest and most important port and work that's not happening there today. Very quiet, and we're all hoping that the work is happening behind the scenes instead. For instance, we did hear from the union a short time ago who confirmed that it had now issued a second strike notice explaining, which will mean it'll be stopping work on Saturday morning. And it also explained its caucus's position and why it wasn't satisfied with the mediators deal that it was presented with last week. It said it regretted the economic impact of the strike and urged the government to stay out of their collective bargaining. We also heard from the Employees Association via another statement, and it said the reissuance of a second strike notice would basically guarantee a repeat of actions and impacts that last week's strike had on the economy. We spoke to an industrial relations expert this morning just to understand where this all leaves us now.
If they're talking to the media, they're not negotiating. Back in the days when we had these 3-day strikes, everybody went back to work. They knew what was going to happen. It was all very, very orchestrated. And so now that pattern has been broken. So I think in the end that the minister has made up his mind that they're going to act, and they're working on what that will be.
Okay, so Georgie,
I don't
that's
really
the state of
think
play
that we have to, like, make any guesses on what that's going to be, right?
The union and the employers, but obviously this ripples through the Canadian economy. What are business groups saying about the economic impacts of all of this?
Yeah, well, unsurprisingly, they're quite upset with this new development. We've heard from many business associations across the country who tell us just how upset this news has been to them. Some say that the work stoppage is costing the economy hundreds of $millions a day. We've certainly spoken to the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade many times.
Nah, I thought it was fucking 10. Oh, yeah. It just goes to show you how much you can't fucking trust for-profit media, man. But I guess CBC is, like, publicly funded, but they still have like some shit going on.
The
right?
last few weeks, who tell us that the last time that they striked for 13 days, it disrupted the economy to the tune of $9.7 billion in trade disruption. They also estimate that the work stoppage is preventing about 60,000 containers from coming into the port. And if this work stoppage extends until the end of this month, that number could balloon out until to 250,000 containers that have been prevented from entering BC's ports. Over the course of the last few weeks, CBC has spoken to a range of businesses who tell us just how difficult it is to be agile in these really challenging conditions. So as it stands, the union has told us that it's willing to be back at the bargaining table as soon as possible and is happy to stay there for as long as it takes. And we do know that work will be continuing at the port later today.
Okay, Georgie, thank you so much. That's the CBC's Georgie Smythe in Vancouver. Okay, for more on this, we have Perrin Beatty in studio. He is the president and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. So, Mr. Beatty, thanks for joining us yet again. Last time we spoke, you were very relieved because there was a deal. What's your mood right now?
Not relieved, to put it mildly. I'm very worried about where we are. We hadn't unclogged the bottleneck before this second strike started. And it takes an awful lot longer to unscramble the egg than it does to scramble it in the first place. So we have this incredible bottleneck that's backed up all the way through the supply chains in Canada, and now we're adding more to that. The economic consequences for Canadians in every part of the country are going to be enormous.
You were worried also about reputational damage of the strike that you thought could be abated because it did end. There was a collective agreement and things went back to work, and now we have the stop, and potentially starting again situation. What does that do?
It's a major concern because what it means is that international shippers looking at going in and out of Canada are going to ask themselves whether they can count on West Coast ports to do it. And they're apt to ship through the United States instead of shipping through Canada. It means lost jobs from Canada. It means lost income for Canadians as well. So it's very bad news if we scare people away. And one of the issues in this new strike is the question of the length of the contract itself. What had been proposed by the mediator was a 4-year contract, which would give us some stability and a chance to restore our reputation.
Right, and the union says that's too long. And for people who like stability, you can understand they might want another crack at reopening the contract, but for business groups and shippers, they want to know there's going to be labor peace for a 4-year period.
Exactly. You have to send the message to people that if you're dealing with Canada, you've got stability. You know what you're dealing with. Otherwise, people simply go elsewhere.
So the Prime Minister has convened the Incident Response Group, which is essentially high-level officials and high-level cabinet ministers, and this is one of the issues on the agenda. Seamus O'Regan, the Labour Minister, who was with them trying to encourage and negotiate a settlement, now sounds quite frustrated in the public statements he said, calling the strike illegal, which is something for the Labour Minister to say. What do you think the government is going to do right now?
I don't know what they are going to do. I know what they should do, and they need to get Parliament back as rapidly as possible. Until members of Parliament go back to work, the longshoremen won't be going back to work. And what's absolutely critical here is that we put the interest of the country as a whole ahead of everything else. It is every single hour that goes by that we keep these ports closed, the damage compounds, and the impact on Canadian families, Canadian businesses, Canadian communities is enormous.
Is that the only way forward now, from your point of view, given what's happened in the negotiations between the players? I mean, the mediator wrote an agreement that, at least initially, they said was good enough until, I guess, it got circulated more widely and the union side said no. I mean, is back-to-work legislation the only option at this point?
I believe so. I was so relieved and so happy last time we spoke because we had an agreement. Both what we had was an independent mediator who wrote his recommendations, and both the union and management said, we agree, and let's get things reopened. Then the union changed its position, and then it went out on strike again with an illegal strike. This just puts Canada and the Canadian economy in a very uncertain spot.
But you say you want to get Parliament back, and it's on break for the summer. It's a minority Parliament. And the Confidence and Supply Agreement is the Liberals, the New Democrats. The NDP has made it very clear they're not going to support back-to-work legislation. And it's not at all clear to me if the Conservatives will, at least based on their public statement. How easy do you think it is to get it through this particular Parliament? Because it doesn't seem to be an obvious vocal partner for the Liberals at this point in time.
Members of Parliament are going to be hearing from their constituents, and they're going to be making themselves loud and clear. The provincial premiers have weighed in now, a series of them on this. And it's going to be very clear to members of Parliament that we need to settle this. The Port of Montreal strike was settled in a day. And this has dragged on for 13 days and is being renewed. You're a student of history. I think you'll be interested. It was hard to believe, but 50 years ago was my first summer as a member of Parliament. And we were called back in the summer from the break by Prime Minister Trudeau, who led a minority government, because the railway non-op workers had gone on strike. He declared it an emergency and said that we had to legislate them back to work. Parliament came back, legislated it back to work, and things got moving again.
The Port of Montreal comparison gets brought up. The argument from the government saying the two aren't similar is because negotiations there had dragged on for years. There was no deal within sight, and we were in the middle of a pandemic, and you needed that port to get critical supplies in. And they argue this situation is not the same because there was progress being made at the bargaining table. But I guess your view is that what's happened in the last 24, 36 hours completely changes that scenario.
And I would argue that it's not the same for another reason. The Port of Montreal is a vital port for Canada, but it's Canada's second largest port.
Yeah, but it's, you know, it's also in like one of the most like expensive places to live in the country, right? So when it comes down to them like saying we want better wages for cost of living, I don't necessarily blame them, right? So, you know, if I'm not mistaken, like, I think it's what? I think you need like at least fucking $33 per hour to live in BC with a one-bedroom apartment, right? Was that it, or is my numbers off? It was either that or Toronto, but either way, like it's not enough, right?
On the West Coast, the first and third largest ports in Canada and about 30 others are affected by this strike. This means the damage is much more severe than the damage that was being done in the case of the Montreal port strike. It's vital that members of Parliament do their job. If I'm more worried if members of Parliament withdraw their services than if the port workers withdraw theirs, because what it means is that Canadians aren't being served.
So how much time do you think the government can give this? I mean, the 72-hour clock is ticking down to Saturday. Do you give it a bit of a window there to see if there can be a compromise reached between now and when the picket lines might go back up, or do you have to recall Parliament right away?
Well, like I said time and time again, there's always two sides to a strike. And, you know, people who can end the strike.
I believe that Parliament should be recalled right away. If there's a settlement between now and then, great, that's tremendous. All of us would like to see it. But what we shouldn't do is simply dither and wait to see on Saturday whether or not there's been an agreement, and then add a couple more days to the damage that's being done. The government needs to send a very clear message now that they're standing up for the interests of Canadians, of all Canadians, and members of Parliament need to get back to work.
Okay, Perrin Beatty, President of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Fuck, I hate this. Bro, they're not even asking for much. It sounds like it sounded like the fucking offer that they were given was complete and utter dog shit. So it's no surprise that they would go back to the picket line, right? So, like, just fucking hate this. Like, we're so fucking anti-worker. It's like, ugh. I don't even know what to say anymore.
All right, for more on this story and its national implications, we've reached Bea Brusk. She is the president of the Canadian Labour Congress and joins us now from Winnipeg. So Bea, leaders calling for back-to-work legislation. We heard it from a lot of premiers and the business groups. How do you respond to those calls?
Well, we certainly think that 72 hours is a very long time in the world of bargaining and labor relations. And so we know that that gives the parties an opportunity to get meaningfully back to the bargaining table and to address the issues that are keeping us from having a ratified collective agreement.
Yeah. Remember when, like, the last time I think it was the last time we covered this strike on July 1st. I think that they were, if I'm not mistaken, I think they were trying to push the whole narrative of like I don't, was it this strike or was it the teacher strike in Ontario? I don't remember, but it was one of the two, where it could be both for that matter, that they were pushing this narrative of like, oh, they the workers are being unreasonable and don't want to come to the bargaining table and all that, and you know, aren't willing to accept our fucking shitty our fucking shitty offers that we're giving them. Like, yeah, I don't necessarily blame people for wanting to go back to the bargaining table with the shitty offers that you're providing them, as well as like, no, you know, they're always willing to go to the fucking bargaining table.
From your perspective, how do negotiations continue from here when it looked like the leadership had an agreement in place, and then when it was circulated more widely, the union backed away?
Well, certainly ILWU followed their constitution, and they have a contract caucus that reviews a tentative deal. That contract caucus made the decision that this deal did not meaningfully enough address the issues that their members sent them to the bargaining table with. And so that means that we really need to make sure that the parties get back to that table to have further conversations on issues like automation, on issues like contracting out, to make sure that these jobs can be safeguarded.
Yeah, like,
we're talking.
I know people are going to get mad at me for saying this, but I don't really care. The thing is that they are fighting for their job security and, you know, job security of other Canadians within this industry, or that work at other ports, right? It's the exact same thing that's going on, like, to a certain degree with AI in Hollywood, with the Writers Guild going on strike and the Actors Guild going on strike, right? Or joining the Writers Guild, right? It essentially boils down to the same thing. Like, they want to protect job security. They want, you know, better working conditions, obviously better pay, because that's the one thing that the media won't shut up about. And, you know, they're trying to make it like infinitely better for other port workers, right? Because one win in this area is a win for all the other port workers, right?
About 3,000 to 4,000 jobs that are potentially on the line in the future as automation takes hold in this particular industry. So it's critically important that we support workers that work all up and down the coast of British Columbia, that have family and community sustaining jobs, and we need to make sure that they continue to be community and family sustaining jobs into the future.
But what about all those other workers in community and family sustaining jobs that are along the supply chains right now that are being significantly disrupted by this on again, off again, potentially on again strike at the BC ports? We've seen potash producers.
I love this argument being like, okay, what about the businesses? Think about the business owners. What about the business owners, right? Business owners, you know, they don't care, right? Like, the only thing that, like, especially small business owners are terrified of is becoming part of the working class again, right? So, of course, you're going to hear them chirp about it, right? But, you know, that ultimately doesn't even fucking matter.
Shut down in Saskatchewan, the knock-on effect in the auto sector and the energy sector and just the retail sector, it looks like it's been quite significant, and it looks like any prolonging is going to make it even worse.
We agree that there's been a significant impact, obviously, on other industries, but there is 72 hours that we have right now before Saturday morning. The parties do have an opportunity to sit back down at that bargaining table to address these issues. At the end of the day, we need to value all jobs, and we need to make sure that we're properly addressing these particular issues that this particular industry has at this moment in time. Right now, we're talking about longshore workers. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about different kinds of workers. We need to be able to support all workers in Canada to build a strong economy. And, you know, making sure that we can actually reach those agreements across the bargaining table means that we have more stability in these different sectors.
The government, though, it endured a strike and a work stoppage that went on for 13 days before it got to the point of getting the mediator to essentially write a tentative agreement based on the inputs they'd received from the parties. And now that process has obviously failed, and you can see the frustration in the public commentary and the public statements coming from the cabinet ministers who have been speaking on this today. I mean, based on your read of that, what's your sense of how likely back-to-work legislation appears to be at this moment in time?
Well, we heard it from your previous guest that back to work legislation is something that the demand for it is coming from many corners, right? And I can tell you that workers are
it's
just as
mostly coming from like liberal and conservative politicians. So, I imagine some NDP probably too, right? And then like fucking like business owners. That's it. And then like some dumbasses who vote like conservative and liberal, who have like no sense of who has no sense of like any form of class consciousness.
frustrated. Workers would rather be at work, but at the same time, workers need
He's
to
right.
have protections to know that they can actually afford to live in the communities, that they can actually raise their families in these communities, and that their jobs are not going to be threatened in the future by contracting out and by automation. So the frustration is on every side. It's not just a one-way street. And so we really are calling on Ottawa to get these parties back to the bargaining table and to more meaningfully address the final issues so that we can actually reach a tentative agreement. Nothing would be nicer than to reach a tentative agreement by Saturday morning that meaningfully addresses these points and that is going to allow for a ratified collective agreement.
So what if we get to Saturday morning and the picket line?
Yeah, because like strike action is always the last
disrupted and critical supply
option
chains are
that
even further
they want to
tangled
do.
up,
Keep that in mind.
The knock-on economic effect is more profound. I mean, what is a government supposed to do when you've seen the mood shifting on this? I mean, what does the government do if this goes back up on Saturday morning?
Well, obviously, government is going to do what they believe is in the best interest of our economy, but I would argue the best interest of our economy is to actually push these parties to get a deal done. You know, when we have the 5 largest global shipping companies in the last year alone taking in $100 billion in profits, an increase of 1,500% since 2019, when workers' wages are lagging behind, when workers' job protections are lagging behind,
Yeah, because
I think there's a long way
all
to
that fucking money goes to the CEOs, goes to the and executives, right? It doesn't go back into the workers. So understandably, they're not fucking too impressed by that, right?
go here to actually addressing these things in a meaningful way and to get to a deal.
Are you surprised the workers rejected this deal based on the fact that what the mediator put on the table, what was acceptable to the people who were in the room at the time? Are you surprised it got to the point? Because this is an uncommon thing, it seems to me, for something to be rejected so quickly and so out of hand.
No, the only reason why it seems like such an uncommon thing, this is actually a lot more common than he's making it out to be, which is a little bit disingenuous, but when it comes down to negotiations fall through all the time, right? And when it comes down to the this instance is that it's a lot more public, right? So of course it's going to, like, the one time when something falls through, of course it's going to seem like, oh, this, you know, other unions in the past have agreed to tentative agreements, right? But, you know, that's not always the case. Like, look at the the excellent example, or an excellent comparison that I can make was that strike in Ottawa, or not Ottawa, in Ontario, with the teachers and education workers, right? Like, they had tentative agreements that fell through a lot, right? They had, like, what, 1 or 2 that fell through, right? So it's, no, the only reason why this is, like, such like mainstream news right now is because of the implied impact that it will have on the Canadian economy.
I think that for most workers in Canada now, the reality of ratifying a collective agreement is more challenging because the demands are higher because workers have been put through the ringer over the last number of years. We've seen runaway inflation. We've seen significant increases in the cost of housing, groceries, and everything else. The demands and the expectations are significantly heightened. And so for the bargaining committee to make a decision at the table to bring that to their caucus, they've gone through their democratic process as it's outlined in their constitution, and we have to adhere to that, and we have to respect that process. These are folks that were appointed and elected by the respective members of the various different locals, and so we stand by the decisions that their members are going to be making.
Bea Brusk, it's always good to talk to you. That's the president of the Canadian Labour Congress, Bea Brusk in Winnipeg. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
BC port workers say they will resume striking as soon as Saturday. This after the Federal Industrial Relations Board declared the latest job action illegal. Meanwhile, the federal government is facing opposition pressure to end the strike.
Justin Trudeau must...
we're going to get to this, but like, he looks like, if you saw the initial photo op that he did out in the Calgary Stampede, he looks like a fucking AI generated Texas lawmaker. Like, I don't know why he's fucking changing his look, man. Like,
do his job and end this strike immediately because of the massive cost to workers, consumers, and businesses. And we're calling on him to deliver a plan to end this strike within the next 24 hours.
To look at the options the federal government has at this point, we turn to Lisa Raitt. Lisa, of course, is a vice chair of global investment banking at CIBC and a former federal minister of labor. All right, Lisa, Pierre Poilievre says he wants a plan in 24 hours. So given his deadline, what can Seamus O'Regan and the rest of the government do at this point?
Honestly, nothing. The most I can see coming out of it is possible back to work legislation being passed.
All this.
Well, there are three options. He goes in and he puts pressure on the parties at the table to come up with their own solution that the committee is going to recommend for ratification to the membership. That's number one. That's the best solution, quite frankly, David, because that means the parties have it in their own control. Option number two is if the minister believes that this is a really good deal and that perhaps it's not getting to the members as it should, he can order a vote. I mean, it is a swinging for the fences kind of moment, and not a lot of people use the tool, but it's a tool nonetheless. He would order a vote. Strike still continues as the vote happens, so it's more processy than you'd like to have. Doesn't really stop what's happening in terms of work stoppage, but maybe you end up getting a worker kind of movement that likes this deal. Unlikely. So option three is the last one, and that is the traditional back to work legislation by bringing back Parliament and introducing legislation that's going to implement some kind of a deal on them, or perhaps arbitration.
Okay, so those are the paths that are there. I wonder what you divine from the tone of the government. It sounded more angry and more frustrated than at any point so far. So how do you interpret that, and what do we draw from that reaction?
Yeah, it's a roller coaster. Sorry, David. It's a roller coaster of emotions. I mean, there was elation when the deal was struck. Then there was this concern expressed very strongly that patience was no longer their forte when it came to having the strike. Earlier today, it was the Canadian Labour CIRB, Canadian Industrial Relations Board, ruled that, in fact, the union did not give proper notice for 72 hours for the strike to continue again or start again on July 18.
The funny thing about this, when it comes down, that I don't think I touched on when it comes down to like striking, is that like bosses don't give fucking like 2 weeks notice for laying people off, or like any form of notice for laying people off, right? So
So the minister puts out a tweet that says this strike is illegal. Harsh language. I mean, yes, they missed the notification period, but the strike itself, like the big strike that we're all thinking about, it's not illegal. And
No,
I'm hoping
he's
that they
right.
end up coming to a deal themselves, quite frankly, because it looks like the government is beginning to get very frustrated with the union.
Yeah, and the union did comply with that ruling right away, took the picket lines.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that is that like they're not willing to comply with the fucking union. The union's willing to comply, but they're not willing to comply with the union, right? And they purposely try to villainize any form of labor action within the country because it looks bad on them, right? As well as like they don't really give a shit about like average working class Canadians on top of that. So
down and issued that proper 72-hour notice. So based on everything, and based on the roller coaster of emotions, based on they thought they had a deal, and based on the economic circumstances that are there and the time they've given it, do you think they've reached the point where this government can justify and sell the use of back-to-work legislation?
I think they've been backed into a corner. They have to. And it's the other external that you need to mention as well is that have they done enough to fulfill what the Supreme Court has said is the right amount of process to ensure that you're not breaching somebody's rights to collective bargaining? And that's the important test, I would assume, for this government.
Keep in mind that is actually protected under the Bill of Rights, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, the Bill of Rights.
And I would submit they have done enough so they can bring in back to work legislation, bring the House back, and see how they fare in terms of how long it will take for them to get through it.
Okay, so bringing the House back in the summer is not going to be popular with any of the parties, but back to work legislation in particular will not be popular with the New Democrats, and that's who they've relied on for a while now to pass legislation. Do you think the confidence and supply agreement could survive back to work legislation?
Well, is back to work legislation something that is a confidence motion? I don't think it is. But it's up to the government whether they declare it as such and put it back into the hands of the NDP as to whether or not they want to push the matter. I would not bet against the NDP in terms of how they feel about back to work legislation. This is very central to their thesis and to how they feel about labor relations, that everyone has the right to strike and they have the right to collectively bargain their own agreement. So I would say it's a tough one for the NDP. It would be very interesting for the Liberal government to make it a confidence motion. But other than that, of course, it survives. It just means that they disagree on this matter and everyone proceeds as it never happened.
Yeah, even with the underpinning of the whole thing is no surprises, right? That's what they said on day one. Do you think this would qualify as a surprise if you're Jagmeet Singh and his caucus?
No, it shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, the mechanics of getting to a strike and the mechanics of getting to a deal are very well known. They're set out in legislation. The timing is known of it. Everyone could see this coming from a million miles away. So no, there's no surprise here. And I think Mr. Singh actually came out very early and said we are not going to support back to work legislation. And maybe that's why the Liberals have taken a bit of a beat in terms of trying to figure out how to move this along and didn't rush for back to work right away.
So, okay, clearly the New Democrats aren't going to support it, so they need another party. The Conservatives, it's unclear to me. They said that they blame the government for this.
The Conservatives, like, they love saying this. Like, they've done this before. They love saying that, oh, you know, they're very, like, pro-worker and everything like that. But, like, as we covered, like, with the, I think it was, the 2017 rail strikes? The Conservatives voted with the Liberals for back-to-work legislation on those rail workers, right? So they claim a lot of things, but they do the exact opposite, right?
As they do on many issues, and they say they want the government to solve it ASAP. But it was unclear to me from Pierre Poilievre's answers whether or not they would vote for back-to-work legislation. What do you think the Conservatives would do? Could they count on the Conservatives to end this port strike if that's what it takes?
Yeah, I don't know. I actually don't know. I was at Stampede last week. I talked to Paramedi at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and I talked to a number of my former colleagues who sit in Parliament right now. And at that moment in time, prior to the deal being announced, they were uncertain as to whether or not there was going to be this move towards supporting back to work legislation. So I don't know the answer to the question. I think things may have changed a little bit. There's definitely more pressure, and the fact that
I
you
don't
can
think
see
anything
this
is. I
very
honestly don't think
large,
anything has changed in that regard, right?
I would say, yawning gap of possibility of this strike continuing well into September. I mean, that's scary, and maybe that'll be something that'll get through to the opposition in terms of how the leader's office is feeling about this.
Okay, Lisa, always appreciate the time. That's former Federal Labor Minister Lisa Raitt.
Thanks.
Okay.
But we begin with the breaking news out of BC tonight, where the union representing port workers now says they are withdrawing a second 72-hour strike notice.
Yeah.
Workers had walked off the job yesterday, but a federal board ruled this morning that the walkout was illegal as no strike notice had been given. Workers pulled down their pickets after that decision, and they were back on the job earlier this afternoon. Now, for the moment, it appears they'll be working for the foreseeable future. CBC's Georgie Smythe joins us live now from the Port of Vancouver. So, Georgie, a lot has happened in the last 24 hours. Not a lot of details about why they're withdrawing this now. So what do we know at this point?
Well, a lot's happened in the last 24 minutes, I can tell you. So it's a lot to wrap our heads around and to keep up to date with. But I can tell you that the union, as you said, posted a message to its Facebook group, very short to the brief, a single sentence saying that the stop work that was planned for this Saturday has been cancelled, and we truly don't know the reason for that. It's not clear what this means for negotiations. And
maybe they maybe they have another tentative agreement that they're going to be looking at and voting on. Maybe that's it.
Also just plans to head back to the bargaining table. We're not sure exactly what impact this could have on the ongoing labor dispute. So a lot of mystery surrounding this message, and up until now, today at least, the two parties in this dispute have been very vocal about where they've stood. Port workers, as you mentioned, were striking briefly over the past 24 hours. That started yesterday afternoon. It ended this morning. The picket lines came back down after the Canada Industrial Relations Board ruled that work stoppage was illegal because the union hadn't provided that 72-hour strike notice. We understand that the union is appealing that decision, and we also understand that they chose to comply and to send workers back to work. And as far as we know, they are back on the job here, we think. We've been hearing and seeing some activity, but it is hard to see and to know from here. Earlier today, the union had also confirmed that second strike for this Saturday that they've now cancelled. So it's unclear exactly what will happen from now and exactly what we might expect in the next 24 hours and next few days as well. In terms of the other party as well, we did hear from the Employers Association. They gave us a statement earlier today laying out some of the details that the mediator had presented to them. And they're continuing to sort of talk about the union's actions as being unnecessary and reckless, and that these continued disputes
surprising.
are holding the Canadian economy hostage.
Yeah, and you're right. This is all breaking now in the last half hour. So we're trying to figure out why this changed for the union. What are businesses now saying? And they're impacted by all of this. Have they heard about this? What are you hearing from the businesses who are impacted?
Yeah, well, it's unclear if the businesses necessarily know about this latest development with the cancellation of that work stoppage, but we do know that the uncertainty itself is upsetting to them. It's hurting their businesses. We did speak to someone in Ontario, actually in Vaughan, Ontario. She's an importer and distributor of souvenirs around the country. She says that she has goods that she expects to arrive here in the Port of Vancouver or up in Prince George, up in the north, and she doesn't know when she'll see those products.
The current timing is absolutely awful for us, as this is the busiest time of the year for us. These are very, very key months to our business, and we are sitting with hundreds of thousands of dollars of merchandise sitting in various stages of arrival, and we need to ship to our stores now, not next week or next month.
I love how they get like the one like, or I love how they get like a random fucking small business owner being like, "Oh, I need these pork strikes to end so that I can continue to exploit my workers."
So we do know that the work stoppage so far has been costing hundreds of millions of dollars a day. But in terms of where we go from now, with the cancellation of the work stoppage on Saturday, it's unclear exactly what will happen now. And to recap, that unexpected message from the union in the last half hour saying that the planned work stoppage on Saturday for 9 a.m. Pacific time is cancelled, and it's unclear where we go from here. Dwight?
CBC's Georgie Smythe in Vancouver, trying to stay on top of this developing story for us. Thank you for this, Georgie.
Renee, just days ago we thought this was all over. What happened?
Well, Ian, late this afternoon, we got word that the picket lines were going back up here, and 7,400 port workers were off the job again. Now, according to the International Longshore Warehouse Union, something called the Longshore Caucus has rejected this tentative deal for two main reasons. The first, that they don't believe it protected the jobs now and in the future from contracting out and automation, and they also took issue with the wage increases when they compare it to the record profits that the companies are making. Now, the employer says the union has rejected what it called a fair and balanced deal. This was a deal put to them by the federal mediator last week. There was a 24-hour deadline on it from Ottawa to either reject or accept it. They accepted it. That ended the 13-day work stoppage. 5 days ago, work got going back on the ports here, but not anymore.
And Renee, what's the reaction been?
Well, the union says they are ready to go back to the bargaining table, and they'll stay there as long as it takes. We've heard from businesses who say they're very disappointed. They say $500 million in trade is lost every day the ports are shut down, and they're calling on Ottawa to legislate them back to work. Now, Ottawa at this point is not commenting on the ratification process, but keep in mind, this impacts 30 ports across BC, including Vancouver, Canada's busiest port. So for now, all that cargo is going to remain in the ports or in the harbor with nowhere to go. Ian?
Renee Filipponi.
All right, so let's move on to some of the conservative shit that I wanted to get onto. So, for those who don't remember, we did coverage. Some of this stuff might be more, or might be new or not new to any of you. It's been hitting the mainstream now, but we covered it back at the beginning of the month. So, for those who don't know, there have been a total of four bodies four bodies of Indigenous women connected to the same murder, or the same like individual who murdered them, right? If I'm not mistaken, and then they also found another body that was not linked to that case in a Winnipeg landfill. This is not unsurprising. This is something that I hear, have heard time and time again when it comes to living as an Indigenous person in Manitoba. It's not just landfills, though. It's also stuff like, say, the Red River. Like, I remember a couple years ago, maybe it was like a decade ago or something like that, they pulled out an Indigenous woman's body from the Red River. But this is not unsurprising. Heather Stephenson has chosen not to do anything about this, and despite that this is literally her jurisdiction to do so, and is hoping and praying that Justin Trudeau does something so that she can make him look like the bad guy, right? Anyways, let's watch.
For a 12th day, demonstrators held their ground outside this landfill in Winnipeg in spite of a court injunction to stay off the road. They've been blocking the main entrance to protest the province's decision not to search for the remains of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron.
And what Premier Stephenson said made me very hurt and angry. How can she say no?
Winnipeg police say...
So, like, because I actually talked with some family about... Was it a family? No, I think it was a friend of mine. We actually talked about this, and now I don't remember. Either way, I remember having this conversation with someone. And the only reason why she's not doing anything about this is because it's Indigenous women. If it was, you know for a fact that if it was a little blonde girl, like a little blonde white girl, she would have easily went and searched this landfill tooth and, or like, to like every single last plastic cup, right? But since it's Indigenous women, and like every other fucking person in this goddamn province, for the most part, they don't give a shit about the missing and murdered Indigenous women. Which, for one, is fucking, like, psychotic, right? Like, we know where the bodies are, right? She's just making up some bullshit excuse on why she can't do it. Oh, it's too costly. Oh, it's gonna take too long. Oh, this and that. And like, come on. Like, it's super frustrating.
They believe the women were murdered by a serial killer and that their remains ended up at a different...
And like, the funny thing is, right, is that like, it ultimately doesn't even matter because, you know, time and time again, we see that they, you know, whenever we have like a psychotic serial killer within Manitoba, they, as long as they fucking, you know, murder someone, like murder and like so like an Indigenous person and fucking throw their remains somewhere, you know, the RCMP isn't going to look for them because they tend to classify Indigenous kids that get kidnapped as runaways, as well as, you know, when it comes down to like, you know, we have evidence on where they are, and not allowing police to do their investigation is just completely fucking ridiculous. Like, come on, bro. The RCMP and the fucking police don't do anything anyways. This is like the one time you can actually get them to do something instead of like beating the shit out of like poor black people.
Privately owned landfill. Police have not moved in to arrest the protesters, saying, "Our intent is to achieve a peaceful resolution." This protest started after Premier Heather Stephenson told families and First Nations leaders a search would be unsafe for workers. Grand Chief Kathy Merrick is still looking for a firm commitment from Ottawa and is asking the Premier to reconsider.
We are not asking that the entire landfill site be searched. We know from what has been shared that it has been narrowed down to a specific area.
Yeah, that's another thing about this, right? Is like, we know exactly the areas that are, we know exactly the areas where, you know, there's most likely to be something, right? But like we see time and time again with these mouth-breathing conservatives, and those who are very like anti-fucking like Indigenous, mostly because they're fucking racists and bigots, they're like, no, we don't care. Like, it's very infuriating.
Experts say a search could take up to 3 years and cost as much as $184 million. Those who took part in a feasibility study say a search can be done safely.
Yeah, exactly.
Argument, I guess, that would oppose those findings, in our opinion, aren't necessarily based in fact.
A statement from the Office of Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller says Manitoba has to be involved because the landfill is a provincial responsibility.
It is.
Manitoba's Premier, meantime, is standing by the decision not to search. Josh Crabb, CBC News.
Yeah, it's because she's a piece of shit, and I can't. And like I really hope that we elect her out, because I hate pieces of shit like this. But like, as we've seen time and time again, when it comes to provincial elections, whether it be Doug Ford's re-election or Danielle Smith's re-election, they won only because of low voter turnout and voter suppression. That's the only reason why. And to be perfectly honest, I'm expecting the exact same thing to happen here, despite the fact that Heather Stefanson is the most disliked premier in all of the country.
Families of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls refuse to be ignored.
And I'm going to continue playing my drum and singing for my beautiful niece, Tanya Jane Ipinat. She don't belong in a dump.
Yeah.
They took their message directly to premiers to get on their agenda.
We're not trash!
Calling for landfills to be searched for the remains of their loved ones. Like
the main reason why I think Heather Stefanson isn't going to do anything about it is because we already have confirmation of 4 for sure, with a possible 5th. And I think she knows that if they do search the landfill, right, they're going to find a lot more Indigenous individuals or Indigenous bodies within the landfill. And I don't fucking care, right? You need to do your job. Instead of like trying to fucking privatize our healthcare, like, this is like the bare minimum is fucking looking. Like, goddamn.
Bria Harris's mother.
Search the damn landfills. I shouldn't have had to come here in the first place.
The issue brought to the forefront as premiers met with Indigenous leaders in Winnipeg.
Our women deserve more. We don't belong. We're not garbage.
As a mother, my heart goes out to those individuals who have lost a loved one. And I can tell you that, but I'm also the premier. And we have to make what is very, very difficult decisions.
Oh, fuck
Manitoba's premier seemed to be...
Fuck off. As a mother, you should understand that you should be, you know, doing the bare fucking minimum to bring any form of closure to these families. But you don't give a shit. Because all of it is just performative.
Moved but was unswayed.
We cannot ignore the complexity of the issue and the objective viability of other considerations, things like toxic and hazardous waste that are in the landfill.
Missing and murdered Indigenous women, just one issue raised with premiers Monday, ahead of 2 more days of meetings for provincial and territorial leaders, where affordability and new clean fuel regulations are top of the agenda.
Atlantic Canada has been disproportionately impacted by these regulations. We don't think that's fair as a province, PEI, and as a region.
As for affordable housing,
it's the #1 issue for us. Housing has been a core issue for many decades in the north.
Healthcare is always an issue.
Not just housing in the north, but also food security. 1 in 3 children in the north, especially in the territories, go hungry. That is absolutely pathetic. There is no reason for that. So I want you to keep that in mind. Right?
At these meetings, but after the federal government put $46 billion in new funding
as well as a lot of those individuals that live in the territories also tend to be more Indigenous. So anyone who says that we give a shit about Indigenous people within this country is fucking lying. Because if that was the case, we wouldn't have 1 in 3 children in the territories going fucking hungry.
The table earlier this year, it will now be up to premiers to figure out how to use that money in a coordinated way to address staggering wait times and a shortage of workers. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Disheartened, and I am absolutely baffled at how things went down.
Cambria Harris, daughter of Morgan Harris, met with Manitoba's Premier Wednesday, who told her the province won't help search for her mother's remains.
It's political yo-yo because they don't want to put a price on Indigenous women's lives and they don't want to pay for them.
Same for Donna Bartlett, grandmother of Mercedes Myron.
It's unbelievable. They won't. She's a human being. That's my granddaughter.
The remains of both Morgan and Myron are believed to be here, Prairie Green landfill just north of Winnipeg. Police say both Indigenous women were murdered last spring. A $500,000 study paid for by Ottawa, conducted by the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, pegs a search at 3 years and up to $184 million.
This is not about funding.
Premier Heather Stephenson insists it's not about money or race.
This is about the safety.
I mean, race it is, for sure. Absolutely. Because you know for a fact that it, like, I keep using the same example, but it's literally true, right? Because we see time and time again whenever there's like a fucking kidnapping of you know, someone of European descent, like an Amber Alert is already sent out by the time that the missing persons report is filed. But when it comes to any Indigenous person within Manitoba, we don't even get that. The only reason why I know so much about this is because I am in the Indigenous community. So I hear about this shit all the goddamn time. And like, the thing is that like, it's a little bit blackpilling, right? Because like, even to a certain degree, even when we do have a provincial NDP government, they do similar things to a certain extent, right?
Of those individuals who would be conducting the search. I mean, the landfill is full
like,
of toxic.
She can claim that it's all about health when it's really not. It's not. It's not about health. Because like, when the fuck has Heather Stephenson gave a shit about health? Remember when we were covering when she was coming into the premiership and COVID, and how like she was removing like mask mandates like pretty much immediately to like to give the fucking silent majority, or not the silent, the loud minority, sorry, of individuals within the province, you know, giving them their way essentially. And if it's not about health, then why the fuck is she trying to completely undermine and eviscerate Manitoba, or the Manitoban healthcare system? If she actually gave a shit about health, she wouldn't have done either of those things. It's all just a political ploy, guys.
Toxic waste.
Police cited safety when they first rejected a search, saying too much garbage built up. They've laid murder charges without the remains. Chief Kyra Wilson represents the community where Myron and Harris were from. She insists the risks can be mitigated.
I don't know if I can say a strong statement where that they don't care, but that's what it feels like right now.
For the chief and these demonstrators,
I mean, they don't care. They don't care. We hear this shit all the time. Like, it's just so defeating, right? And like, understandably so.
It's about more than 2 women. They're convinced there's more bodies and want Winnipeg's largest landfill searched too. The premier says the province will focus on prevention of violence.
If there's a memorial, if they want to go down that path, that we would be willing to help out.
What she means by that is she's going to be increasing police and RCMP budget, and over policing poor and black and brown neighborhoods even more than what they already are. That's what she means by that.
in those areas.
And that they will put a grave site on top of it, but they're not going to do anything about it.
This may not be the last word. The federal government is also being asked for funding. Ottawa says it's looking at the study, but hasn't promised anything yet. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Fuck, I hate conservatives, man.
Cameron McIntosh is in Winnipeg. And Cam, take us through what the Premier said tonight.
Well, in a statement, the Premier is saying that there's basically too much risk to workers that may be involved and too little guarantee that remains would be found after a study concluded a search could take up to 3 years and cost up to $184 million. Now, Mercedes Myron and Morgan Harris...
Like we already discussed, that was only it. That was if they did the entire thing, but we have very narrow, or we have a very narrow idea of where they are, or sorry, we already know where they are, and where we're most likely to find other bodies as well. We don't need to do a full fucking search. Like, that's completely ridiculous.
Harris were two Indigenous women who were killed in Winnipeg back in May 2022. Their remains, police say, were put in the trash and taken to a landfill.
I think we even covered this back in the, back when we heard about something going on with the Winnipeg landfill. I'm not sure if it was this exact landfill or if it was another, or if it was a different landfill, but, you know, they found I think they found a body in one of the landfills during the winter, right?
Their deaths weren't immediately discovered. By the time they were, police said that too much time had passed to make a search of the landfill viable.
Yeah.
Now, that outraged the women's families and Indigenous leadership, who insisted on a search. Ultimately, the federal government agreed to pay the Assembly of Manitoba chiefs to conduct a feasibility study. That feasibility study came up with a $184 million price tag and also concluded that there could be some risk to people involved in the search. Still, AMC Grand Chief Kathy Merrick is dismissing the Premier's rationale.
Well, that's bullshit. Because the feasibility study was conducted by experts. We had an anthropologist on the technical working group, and we realized as well as to, and those issues reflect in the study as to what can be done, as to what preventative measures can be taken not to put anybody at risk.
Now, Premier Heather Stefanson will be speaking at an unrelated event tomorrow morning. In her statement, she said the province is committed to help funding a memorial and is committed to working with the Indigenous community to prevent violence against women.
And Cam, the federal government says it's still reviewing if it will fund the search.
Like,
yeah,
they say that every single time an Indigenous woman is murdered, but like literally nothing happens because it keeps fucking happening. And it's absolutely pathetic.
Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller has always said that he supports the idea of a search, going as far as to say not searching would send a pretty strong signal, but he hasn't committed to funding anything yet. Tonight, his department says that the federal government is still reviewing the proposal. The Assembly of Manitoba chief says it wants an answer by the end of July.
Cameron McIntosh in
Yeah, I
Winnipeg.
don't think we're going to get an answer, unfortunately. Like, it's so stupid.
The blockade blocking the entrance to Winnipeg's Brady Road landfill is expected to come down today, but not by the hands of the protesters. You can see the blockade here, flanked by teepees, red dresses, and a more than 22-meter-long wigwam. The blockade went up earlier this month after the Manitoba government said it would not support searching another local landfill for the remains of two First Nations women. Albert Delatala leads off our coverage this morning. Good morning, Albert. What more do we know about the move to dismantle this blockade?
Good morning, Juanita. Well, as you say, sometime today, protesters expect the city to act on its injunction order and remove the barricade at the entrance of the Brady Road landfill. That's where they were all weekend, despite an injunction issued last week that required the protesters to stop blocking the main road into the city-owned site by Friday night. You can see some of the visuals there from yesterday. It comes about a week and a half after they set up in front of the landfill north of Winnipeg, following the Manitoba government's announcement it would not support a search of the privately owned Prairie Green landfill. That's where the remains of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron are believed to be. Police say the Indigenous women were homicide victims and think they were taken there last year. A protest camp known as Camp Morgan has actually been stationed near the landfill since December. Its leader, Joseph Monroe, told CBC News that when the barricade comes down, he doesn't see it as a loss, but instead as proof that their voices are being heard.
Greater Manitoba is listening and is standing up and saying no to what Heather Stephenson has said, that we should be searching the landfills. It's not just Manitoba. If we look across the country, everybody is in support of what is happening here and dislikes the fact that the city has come against what we are doing here.
The injunction was initially adjourned last week, with the judge hoping protesters and the city would negotiate. Monroe, who we heard from there, he said they didn't plan to keep the blockade up this long, but he said the province's decision not to fund the search and the city's injunction was an offense to the camp and gave them little choice.
Okay, so what happens next, Albert?
Sure, so the exact timing of when the city will act on taking down the barricade is unclear. The camp leader there, Joseph Monroe, he said it would happen this morning sometime. We're told when the barricade is removed, not everything will go. They plan to leave the teepees and a large wigwam structure next to the road. We have some pictures of it as well. You can, so the wigwam, it stands 22 meters long and nearly 6.5 meters wide. It and the teepees will serve as a memorial to the cause and what the area means to the protesters. They plan to build another camp now as well outside of the Canadian Museum, Museum of Human Rights in downtown Winnipeg. We're told they plan to go there today.
Which is really ironic considering that, you know, we have, like Winnipeg has the Museum of Human Rights, despite the fact that, you know, human rights are literally being fucking violated all the goddamn time within Manitoba.
Day to set up more structures there. And meantime, there has been an ongoing war of words between the federal government and provincial officials in relation to the search, with some protesters holding out hope that the federal government could act. Juanita.
All right, lots to watch out for. Thank you so much,
Indeed.
Albert.
Of course.
You're gonna have to take us all then.
Let's fill up the rematch. Make them fill up the damn rematch.
Woo!
That was moments after learning the court had granted the city's injunction and police can enforce it at 6 p.m. local tonight. The blockade was a response to the province's refusal to fund a search for the women's remains. Premier Heather Stephenson says it's too risky given the amount of toxic waste. For more on this, I'm joined by Wab Kinew, leader of the Manitoba NDP. A judge has granted an injunction to remove the blockade at the Brady Road landfill in Winnipeg. The protesters must leave. What's your reaction to this court order?
Well, I think that the judge also said that the protesters should be allowed to remain in the vicinity. So I think he's highlighting a desire that probably many Manitobans want to see, which is to have people come together and look for some kind of compromise or collaborative way forward here. I think Manitoba's Premier Heather Stephenson has made a serious mistake in ruling out the possibility of any search. I think we have to put the families first and foremost in our thoughts here. They clearly want to find the remains of their loved ones. And I think those of us who want to see public safety supported in Manitoba should recognize that finding the remains of these women may, in fact, increase the likelihood of a conviction in this case. And I think we would all like to see...
Yeah, that's another thing that, you know, they haven't really been talking about. Like, he's absolutely right about that. Is that, you know, if they have the suspect, like, wouldn't it make a lot of sense to, like, have someone examine the bodies in order to, like, determine whether they actually did it or not, right? And, like, actually convict the fucking monster that's doing this. But no, knowing knowing how things are, it's a fucking psychopathic white supremacist who's going around fucking murdering every fucking indigenous woman he finds.
Person responsible, if it is in fact this individual who's alleged to have done it, them held accountable. So the point that we're trying to make is that we have to try. We should make a good faith attempt to find the remains of these women. And if there are concerns around price and the cost, then why don't we look at other options, other scenarios? But the bottom line is, out of respect for the families and to line up with the views of the vast majority of Manitobans who are compassionate, we need to make an attempt to do a search here.
Let's talk about the Premier for a second. Heather Stefanson has said quite clearly she thinks it's just too dangerous to search the landfill. There's toxic waste, there's industrial materials. Are you buying what she's saying there? What do you say to her concerns about some of the workers that might actually have to sift?
Anyone with half a brain cell does not buy in to any of that shit, right? Because we've seen her past comments on health and safety, and she does not care.
Through all this stuff.
The only reason why she's making that claim now is because she thinks it has some form of political benefit to her.
Well, you know, we are the party of working people, and I can tell you that there is a way with health and safety regulations that you can ensure that those risks are mitigated.
Yeah,
we know
exactly.
there are many hardworking Manitobans who go to work with, you know, chemicals and in challenging situations each and every day. And
Yeah,
we're very
and in situations like this.
strong on health and safety regulations so that we can protect people in those situations. And in fact, some of the costs that have been laid out for a potential search are all about protecting the worker and mitigating those sorts of risks. So really, I think when we look at the PC Premier Heather Stefanson, her objection really is coming down to the cost. And again, these price tags that are being floated might seem high, but if that is the concern, then why don't we look at other options? Again,
Yeah, and the funny thing is like, the Conservatives always try to, like, the Conservatives claim that they're very fiscally responsible, but they are like some of the least fiscally responsible politicians that I have ever seen in my entire life. Like, it is just completely ridiculous.
if you get a quote from a contractor working on your home and you don't like it, what do? You get a second quote. So I don't see why in this situation we can't ask for a second opinion. We can't talk to other experts. But again, at the end of the day, find a way to get a search done and work with the families to respect their wishes and send a message to them that we care enough about them and the loved one that they've lost that we're at least going to try.
You mentioned the price tag. It is quite staggering. The report that was recently released pegged it at about $84 million to $184 million. And if you come back, you know, if you get a second opinion on it and it's in around the same area, about $184 million at the top end, would you still support a search?
Yes.
Do you think that that's money well spent?
Absolutely.
Well, we've been taking the time to speak to experts about this, and I think that there are other options on the table. Just to share a few with you and your viewers, we know that search dogs were used quite recently in Ontario to locate the remains of a person in a landfill. So why don't we consider that option here in Manitoba?
Yeah, that's a good
We
idea.
could also talk about the question of scale and look at the scale of this project and really arrive at a situation where perhaps we can find a really good balance and a workable path forward here that would respect the desire of the families and our needs around public safety, while also being responsible to the rest of the people in Manitoba, who I know are very compassionate, even if they have some questions about the path forward here. But I think the bottom line is that ruling out any form of a search is a serious mistake. Every common sense Manitoban, every common sense Canadian will tell you there has to be some other option between the $84 million price tag and doing absolutely nothing. And what we're saying is doing absolutely nothing is not an option. So why don't we work with families and work with experts and work with community to come up with another path forward here?
It seems like the Federal Indigenous Services Minister, Mark Miller, agrees with you. He's called Premier Stefanson's response to this heartless, and he feels like there should be more done, that it's just not right to write this off. Do you think...
yeah, because, like, it's the bare fucking minimum, right? But she can't even do that.
it would be appropriate maybe for the feds to step in here and foot the whole bill for this potential search?
Certainly, if the feds were willing to do that, I would encourage them to take action. But I think what Manitobans and Canadians would like to see here is leaders at all levels working together. And, we have an election in Manitoba
because the
this
inherent
fall.
animosity that the conservative leaders, whether it be at the municipal level or the provincial level, that they have towards the federal liberals, right? It's because of that animosity that, literally nothing gets fucking done. We have fucking terrible cost of living crisis like everywhere, and both of them being very capitalist fucking parties, right?
If our team is successful and we're given the chance to serve, what I would want to do is work with the mayor, work with the federal counterparts, work with Indigenous leaders, and of course, most importantly, work with the families and say, okay, we know we got to try. So let's find a path forward here that respects the needs of the families, is viewed as responsible by the broader community, but also reassures everyone across this country that in the face of one of the worst crimes that's ever happened in our province's history, we're not just going to throw up our hands and walk away. In fact, we're going to commit to the work that may be very challenging.
That's the typical conservative response, especially if it's someone of color, right? Because they don't give a shit if a person of color is fucking murdered and tossed in the trash. Because unironically, that's where all these bigots think that they belong, right? So I'm not surprised that they're trying to pull shit like that.
But is super, super important in terms of providing a path forward on safety and reconciliation and bringing people together.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you so much to Manitoba NDP leader Wab Kinew. Thanks for your time.
Hi, I'm Tamara Kendacker. A warning, today's episode contains descriptions of violence against Indigenous women, so please listen with care.
Podcast?
Despite pleas from family members, Manitoba's government says they will not search for the remains of 2 slain Indigenous women believed to be in a landfill north of Winnipeg. Premier Heather Stefanson says a study into the potential operation showed it would be too risky for workers.
This is about the safety of those individuals who would be conducting the search. I mean, the landfill is full of toxic waste, and that is identified in the report. And in the report itself, identified, that there are safety risks, and we are very.
The funny thing about this is, I think she's actually lying about the toxic waste aspect of it. I genuinely believe that she's lying about that because we have on record, even with on this broadcast, of her saying one thing and then backpedaling because it was a lie.
Concerned about that, but I do just want to say as well. I mean, my heart goes out to the families. This is a very, very difficult time for them. And, what we want to do and what we had indicated to those families that we met with yesterday and last week is that we want to help them through this healing process. And so we have offered some funding for that. We've offered more funding for MMIWG2S individuals as well who are at risk in these situations. And then we've also offered, if there is a memorial, if they want to go down that path, that we would be willing to help out in those areas.
That was Manitoba Premier Heather Stefanson. The Premier's office has said that if the federal government supports the search, the province would not stop it and could create safeguards around the risks. The CBC's Cameron McIntosh is following this story. He has more on the overall cost and other reasons why the province has decided not to fund a search.
Potentially up to $184 million and 3 years of searching in Prairie Green landfill north of Winnipeg, according to a study that was funded by the federal government but conducted by the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. And basically, it's that study that the Premier and the province is basing its decision on. Not only
that's only one study, and that's cherry-picked. Keep that in mind.
Are the costs high, but the risks involved in basically going and excavating a landfill come with environmental concerns. This landfill is full of industrial waste and animal waste, and come with air quality concerns, along with just the sheer number of concerns that would come from digging into, say, a slope. So all of those considerations have been looked at by the province, and right now it's saying that it doesn't feel like that this is environmentally responsible and feasible. Here now is more from the Premier of Manitoba, Heather Stefanson.
It's about the safety of those individuals who would be conducting the search. I mean, the landfill is full of toxic waste, and that is identified in the report. And in the report itself, identified that there are safety risks, and we are very concerned about that.
As for what the province is willing to do in this case, the Premier said that the province is willing to help fund a memorial to the two women that are believed to have remains buried in that landfill, and also continue and try to do more to prevent violence against Indigenous women. And right now, Indigenous groups in Manitoba aren't very happy about this. The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, which conducted the study, says it looked at risks in the study and looked at ways to mitigate those, and feels as though risks can be mitigated, and that's part of the reason why the estimate is so high at up to $184 million. That study also says, though, there's no guarantee any remains will be found. So that's all part of the balance here and all part of the rationale. As for Ottawa, it's also being asked to help fund a search here. It did fund the feasibility study. In the past, Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller has said not searching would send a very strong message to the Indigenous community. In a statement today, his office says it's looking at the report and we'll have more to say later. The Assembly of Manitoba Chief says it would like an answer by the end of this month.
We'll see if we actually get an answer, though.
And this is nothing. And this is nothing. There'll be another blockade. We'll blockade railways. We'll blockade highways. We'll do whatever we have to do to keep this in the news, to keep this cause alive. This is bigger than just us here.
I interacted with the leader of the group, and we gained a understanding of what was going to happen today. It was kept peaceful. The protesters removed things they wanted to keep off of the roadway, and that allowed the city to come in and assist us in removing the material that was still blocking the road. I was very happy with today's outcome.
Do you think the landfill should be searched?
My personal opinion really doesn't matter.
Yeah, of course he would. Of course he'd say that.
That's for other people to decide.
That's essentially him saying no.
People that have the authority to do it. Could be government. Could be other private enterprises that have that interest. I don't know.
That's said that the cap remains the cap. We're protecting the cap, and we will defend the cap at all means necessary to our last breath, because it is sacred law. It is the sacred ground, and it is sacred for our ancestors and for all of us to be in.
I have no interest in disturbing the camp at all.
Yes.
Our people are peaceful, loving people, and it's part of our culture. And so,
and I respect that.
I've been ordered by certain people to bring that here and protect our people, make sure our people are safe.
That was
we
someone
just need
else's
to bring the
fucking
emotions
phone.
down a little bit for this roadway.
Well,
That's
it
what
is.
we're talking. I know there's still an emotional issue in regards to the landfill. I get that, but as far as the emotional component tied to this roadway,
Don't you love propaganda? Like, this is so sick. This is so much propaganda, man. They found, like, the one Winnipeg police officer that isn't, like, an outright asshole. Like, 99% of, like, Winnipeg police are just fucking awful. Like, anyone who's ever had an encounter with them know what I mean by that. Like, they're just fucking awful, man.
we need to deal with right now.
But if another, like I said too, if another body and another woman, our sister, ends up in that landfill,
with Linda,
Beardy, it means that another action might have to be taken if nothing is done properly to have this landfill completely shut down in a professional way.
That's our end goal.
To shut it down.
To shut it
to
down.
have Brady landfill closed for good.
The chiefs across Canada
passed a resolution in Halifax last week. I was there, supporting what's being done here by the Warriors, denouncing the acts of the provincial government and their premier. And we have, so many people supporting, even though they can't be here physically. This is about supporting what they're doing, supporting what we're all going through, because the tragedy of one is the tragedy of all. And you're all wearing this too, okay? You're all wearing this in some way.
Just bring more awareness, and we're not going to stop until our voices are heard and there's justice for our women.
A flag is raised and stands tall alongside protesters as they continue to hold their ground near a Winnipeg landfill.
I feel like the world is watching. It doesn't mean that we can just call that a victory and go home. It means that we just have to continue screaming louder and get more attention drawn to what's going on here.
This about 3 days after the city of Winnipeg was granted a court injunction to have the blockade removed. On Friday, that very injunction was burned on the spot during tense moments among protesters. But the protesters say they want to remain near the Brady Road landfill peacefully, with some saying this is part of a healing process.
For those women that lay in that landfill, they need to hear our addresses. They need to hear our...
Keep it. One thing I want people to keep in mind, is that usually when protests like this happen, they're usually a lot more violent towards the Indigenous protesters, right? But I think due to the fact that this is national news, the provincial government can't send in like the cops or the RCMP or whatever to essentially like intimidate them and brutalize them with the police, right? Because like oftentimes, like I'll use an example, right? There was a pipeline that was supposed to go into or go, I don't know if it did or not, but it was supposed to go in through one of the reserves, and it would essentially like poison their water supply, right? And understandably, no one wants to have that in their fucking backyard. So they decided to protest that, and they sent and the provincial government sent in the RCMP. This is nothing new, right? The only reason why is because, like, the only reason why this one hasn't had that happen is because of how much, there's a decent amount of eyes on it, right? And, we do a lot of fucking propaganda trying to make the cops look good and sweep all of it under the rug on like the fucking horrific shit that they tend to do, right?
Drums. They need to know they matter. They need to know we care.
The Assembly of Manitoba.
One thing I want people to keep in mind is they're not just beating the shit out of like, the adults, like the men and women. Generally, there will also be like children at these protests, as well as elderly people, and those people get and those children and elderly people get fucking brutalized by the police as well. Like, if I'm not mistaken, I've actually heard instances of live rounds being shot, at them, right? So, just keep that in mind.
Manitoba chiefs speaking out Monday alongside family members of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron, along with a panel of experts who say the landfill can be safely searched, calling for action and answers from the Manitoba Premier.
They are not garbage. Yet They are being treated like garbage left in a landfill site. No proper burial, no closure for the family.
The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs called on both the provincial and federal governments to work with them to find a way to bring the missing and murdered women home to their loved ones, adding that they're not asking for a complete search of the landfill, but rather the specific area where the remains are believed to be. Farah?
Marnie Blunt in Winnipeg. Thank you, Marnie.
Hey, yo! Hey, yo!
This is one of several confrontations making rounds on social media.
Fucking white supremacists. We gotta love it. We have a lot of fucking white supremacists here in Manitoba. We
are, you then why are they dead?
Outbursts against a blockade set up by those demanding a search of landfills for the bodies of missing or murdered Indigenous women.
Your body, God!
This confrontation, days later, ended up on the man's doorstep. Police have charged a 19-year-old with mischief for a rock thrown through a window. No charges have been laid for the red spray-painted handprints.
I'd rather the money be spent on living women who could be protected instead of women who are already dead.
That's why you're
Wait, what?
We deserve a peaceful burial, though, too.
The Manitoba government...
Wait, what? Like, you know for a fact this motherfucker probably believes that, like, trans women are, you know, grooming kids. Like, you know for a fact that that motherfucker believes in that shit, right? Like, no shot he doesn't.
Announced last week it won't support that, spurring this unrest, saying a search would cost too many millions, take many months or years, and would put searchers at risk digging through thousands of tons of toxic, densely compacted waste here at the Prairie Green landfill, where police believe Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron's remains are.
This has been dealt with in a very heartless way, quite frankly, and we do absolutely have to try as a federal government.
An online petition with more than 35,000 signatures agrees.
They need to go and get them. You know, I'm not going to have my nieces go sit at a landfill to visit their mom for the rest of eternity.
It remains to be seen if Ottawa will commit to foot that bill. A judge hasn't yet ruled on the city's request for an injunction to remove the blockade. Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
I want to check for some stuff. I think we should be okay.
Your people, take care of your own women. We are. Then why are they dead? Why you want to talk like that? You care about
Wait,
them.
why are they dead? Why are they dead? It's because of fucking psychopaths like this. Like, bigoted, racist, bigoted, fucking, transphobic conservatives are unironically why, you know, they fucking, you know, die.
This guy, he brought soil down to add on to this landfill. He brought a shovel. He did that intentionally. He knew what he was doing. He didn't care that he was on camera. Why is the city hiring Impact Security to be here down the road when Impact didn't even take their license plate down?
Money. I work for my He doesn't make the world go around, boy. He does. So?
I called it in to the police liaison, which I don't want to do because those people have failed us repeatedly, time and time again. So will they or will they not follow up on this and charge him?
They have, and they protect fucking psychos like that, right?
That is a hate crime, and he needs to be charged and dealt with accordingly.
Yeah, and the funny thing about this, right, is that those right-wing reactionary psychopaths think that we have, like, freedom of speech here. We don't. We have freedom of expression. There is a difference. Freedom, or hate speech is actually not protected. But, like, as we've seen time and time again, conservatives tend to align themselves with those that are, like, spreading hate speech as well as, you know, doing fucking hate crimes.
This is more than just, you know,
us taking over this little patch of land here. It's our women that are in there. And you would feel the same way if it was your daughters or your mother or your sister or someone that you loved or your wife or anyone. You know, it makes me wonder why these people hate us so much. What did we do to them? You know, that they're gonna...
The only thing that you've actually done was, you know, having a bad spawn point in their eyes, right? That's the only thing that you've done. You know, racist people are gonna be fucking racist people. Like, honestly, I think we need to call people out more on it, right? Like, I don't care if it gets them fucking triggered or whatever, but like, you know, we have to put our foot down somewhere, right?
Try and show up here during the day. So hopefully they show up while you guys are here so we can actually see how racist our city is and the fight that we go through on a daily basis.
The funny thing is like, these people, right? These exact people like fucking shout at Indigenous people, being like, "Go back to where you came from." I'm like, what? You know, they are. You know, we've lived here for a very fucking long time. Piece of shit, man.
What's your name, sir?
Yeah, do you feel strong? Do you feel like a big boy? Do you feel like a big boy leaving your fucking pile of wood there? Huh? Such a big manly man getting triggered over nothing.
So a lot of the families were speaking yesterday about this and saying they're outraged by the decision. What do you want to say to them?
Well, what I did say to them, because I met with them yesterday, and listen, it was a very tough and emotional decision. I mean, I'm a mother, and I can't imagine what they are going through right now.
Oh, is this the entire
And
speech?
my heart goes out to them, and that's why we want to help them in these ways that we have offered to help them. And but again, we need to respect the judicial process that this continues to go through. We don't want to jeopardize that in any way, and we need to ensure, you know, that it's a safe way of doing it if the federal government decides to move forward.
Why is this a federal jurisdiction, though? I mean, it's a provincially regulated landfill.
It's their decision. They haven't made a decision yet whether or not they are choosing to move forward with the search, and you know, that's up to them.
Should it not be a provincial responsibility?
No, it's their. You know, they make the decision, and you know, whether or not I don't control what they do, but again, those are decisions that they will make, and you know, best asked of them. But I do just want to say as well, I mean, you know, my heart goes out to the families. This is a very, very difficult time for them. And, you know,
God,
what we want to
so
do
much.
and what we had indicated to those families that we met with yesterday and last week is that we want to help them through this healing process. And so we have offered some funding for that. We've offered more funding for MMIWG2S individuals as well who are at risk in these situations. And then we've also offered, if there's a memorial, if they want to go down that path, that we would be willing to help out in those areas.
While they acknowledged bodies sitting in the landfill that we're not going to take no for an answer. We had a meeting with Heather Stephenson yesterday where different politicians as well as the Premier sat down with my family as well as Mercedes Myron's family, and they looked us straight in the face and they told us that they will not commit to the search. And she raised the 2 risks associated with the landfill and searches, but that's why the feasibility study was done, all 52 pages. It talks about how to combat that in ways so that those workers can stay safe. And she talks about the workers, she talks about the workers' health, and she's talking about them as if it's going to be city workers, ordinary city dump workers doing this search, when it would not, in fact, be that. It would be people with legitimate experience and people who have been known to search landfills in the past. It would be that.
And how long are you aiming to have this blockade?
This blockade's just for today, but we never know what tomorrow brings, and today is really just about getting the message out that no is unacceptable, and what happened in that room yesterday was absolutely despicable, and there was no respect shown or sympathy shown for my family. She didn't even recognize who we were upon walking in that room, and if she had been following this all along like she claims to have, then she would know who we are. And we've done everything that the provincial government has asked us to. We've done everything that the federal government has asked us to. We did the feasibility study, we completed it, and she basically said that she's comfortable with putting memorialization on top of remains that are known to be there, and more resources for MMIWG2S. But where were those resources when my mother was alive? Your systems failed my mother, and now you're telling me that you will not search for her, and you are comfortable with the landfill remaining a grave site. That's what I took from that meeting.
Because she is, And we need to have another fun day where we just watch a bunch of fun stuff.
Standoff at a Winnipeg landfill site today. A group of protesters entrenched and defiant, refusing to leave despite a court order to stop obstructing the entrance. They want more done to find missing and murdered Indigenous women. As CTV's Taylor Brock reports, support is spreading outside the province.
Protesters at Brady Road landfill are on edge Saturday, one day after the City of Winnipeg delivered an injunction ordering them to clear the roadway.
If I have to stand there to get arrested to make a change or to bring any kind of awareness for the betterment of our people, of our MMIWG, then I will.
Melissa Morisseau has been at the site since the blockade first went up more than a week ago, protesting the province's decision not to support a search of Prairie Green landfill. That's where Mercedes Myron and Morgan Harris's remains are believed to have been dumped.
We don't want confrontation here. We don't want aggression here. We're passive and everyone's welcome.
The group's ability to get to the blockade has been hampered. On Saturday, construction crews paved the road leading to the protest site, blocking the main entrance and slowing traffic to the other landfill entrance. According to the city's website, construction is scheduled to continue until Monday. Meantime, Morisseau says they aren't leaving.
Supporting the families of our MMIWG in Winnipeg and all across Turtle Island, all across Canada, all across the States.
That support is being echoed in Vancouver.
It's the same kind of colonial violence that affects people here on the coast as it is in the prairies, as it is in Ontario and on the other coasts as well, right?
Tracy Fiddler is calling on others to join them in Winnipeg, disappointed more people weren't at Brady on Saturday.
Come beat the heartbeat of our people. Come wake our sisters' souls up. Come help us find them.
The group plans to stay until Prairie Green landfill is searched. Taylor Brock, CTV News, Winnipeg.
A Manitoba judge has granted a temporary injunction to end a blockade at a Winnipeg landfill where dozens of protesters have blocked the main road, demanding a search of a different landfill north of the city for the remains of 2 slain Indigenous women. CTV's Jill Makashon joins me now from outside the courtroom. And Jill, tell us more about today's decision.
Well, after 3 days now of adjournments and delays, the judge has granted that injunction to the City of Winnipeg. The City of Winnipeg had come forward saying blocking access to the main landfill for the city of 750,000 people was posing an environmental concern. and the protesters needed to leave. Protesters, however, say that they have a right to be there. Freedom of expression, they said. And there's another road into Brady Landfill, but it is not for a main thoroughfare, and it's not used for heavy volumes of traffic. So today, the judge said that they do not have the right to block a public roadway. It is illegal. And at 6 p.m. today, they are expected to leave. Of course, we just did hear from a number of the people who were in the courtroom who said they have no intention of leaving and they expect to be arrested.
Talk to us about
I mean,
more
yeah,
about
that's
the
just
emotion.
that's just the sad reality of it, though, right? Is that, like, you know, at this point, like, it's more or less expected that they're going to arrest Indigenous people for protesting, like, literally anything. It's either getting arrested or getting brutalized by police, if not both, right? And it's honestly pathetic that, you know, we have that view on it, right?
Emotion you've been seeing, because this is something that they have been calling for, this search of this landfill, for months.
Yes, and there really has been a presence at Brady Road for months as well. Really, ever since the 4 women killed by an alleged serial killer, since they were named back in December, there's been a presence at Brady Landfill. One of the women was discovered at Brady Landfill. The others, 2 others, are believed to be at Prairie Green, which is north of Winnipeg. But it's the emotion and the stance that these people are taking is that no women should be buried in landfills.
Mm-hmm.
And they're demanding a search that will cost estimated $184 million. The province has said it will not fund it. It will not support it. The federal government still hasn't commented on its intention.
Okay, CTV's Jill Makashan with the latest for us. Thanks so much.
Okay, before that, let's do this one. Right.
This is your trigger warning because this is going to be super, super heavy. It's still an unfolding situation. There's lots of bits and bobbles of it that we don't fully understand or know yet. But let's dive into it with the information that we have. There's at least 1 active serial killer in Winnipeg, but it is assumed that there is more because this gentleman, who I'm not going to show his face, murdered 4 women. And the partial remains of one of his victims was found in the Brady landfill.
Yeah.
Now, this gentleman has a very lengthy criminal record with violence specifically against Indigenous women. He's accused of killing these 3 women as well as an additional victim that was murdered sometime between March and May of 2022. They don't have the identity of the 4th woman, but it is presumed that she is also Indigenous. So that's that. Police decided not to search the landfill, even though they found the partial remains, and it was assumed that the rest of his victims were in that same landfill because they were like, too hard, can't do. There was a ton of protests outside the Brady landfill, and at the time of the protests, workers in the landfill found another body that wasn't related to this case. Just another set of human remains that was in an active part of the landfill that was not connected to this case. The new set of remains was identified as Linda Beardy, and the police were like, no foul play, everything fine. She fell asleep in a dumpster.
Yeah. But like, this is like common, normal, everyday shit that we have to endure, right? You know, when fucking shit like that happens, it's just like, oh, you know, they fell asleep in the dumpster. Oh, the Indigenous kids are just runaways, or whatever the fuck. Like it's so infuriating, right?
That was their answer. A detailed report came out in May of this year explaining it would cost $184 million and take a couple years, about 3 years, to fully search the landfill. Now remember, we're missing at least 3 sets of human remains as well as additional presumed victims. There's a whole slew of people who are missing, and a whole lot of rumors and evidence pointing towards this landfill. And the police were like, nah. Outside organizations have actually offered to jump in and help pay for this, and for some reason RCMP won't do it, Winnipeg police won't do it. They just nope, no thank you, they don't want to, and it's really terrible and super awful. And because you're American, I'm guessing you're not super familiar with the Robert Pickton case, but this was something that we saw with the Robert Pickton case.
I forgot about the Robert Pickton case. Yeah, that was fucking disgusting, man.
If you don't know who he is, go Google him. He is a Canadian serial killer. He was caught in the early 2000s, and immediately after he was caught, the Vancouver Police Department, the Coquitlam Police Department, the RCMP were all like, everything good. And so women who went missing after his arrest were just forgotten and just goodbye. And it became very clear very quickly that they did not give a flying fuck about any of these missing and murdered Indigenous women, because they were like, that guy caught, we done now. And that's what's happening in Winnipeg.
Yeah, and like, unfortunately, it's just the sad reality of it all, right? And Steve Boots did
another example of a provincial government not being willing to do the bare minimum to help its people. This time it's in Manitoba, where the Manitoba government has announced that it will not be searching the Winnipeg landfill for the remains of Indigenous women. Now, if you haven't been following this story, there have already been 2 bodies found in the landfill, and there are strong suspicions that more would be found. But following a feasibility study, Heather Stephenson, the Premier of Manitoba, has determined that the search will not continue. Of course, she's framing this around concerns for health and safety, saying that she is not willing to go forward with the search without a guarantee. She's also concerned about the emotional costs of the search. Of course, there were emotional costs to not doing the search, but she's less concerned about those. And a daughter of one of the victims said that she found this re-traumatizing and disrespectful. Now, the search is not a simple search.
Yeah, and like the thing is that like it's essentially just a giant's fucking spit in the face, right? Being like, we don't care. We just flat out don't care, right?
Up to 3 years and cost up to $184 million. But the government simply won't pay. This is the state of things in Canada. Talking about reconciliation, saying the right things, but when there's an opportunity to take meaningful action, to offer closure to families.
Liberals do it too, right? Like, liberals love talking up about, like, reconciliation and everything like that, but yet they don't fucking do anything about it, right? So, like, it's not surprising in the slightest.
Families, government says no. They care, but only when it's easy. This is heartbreaking. The victims deserve justice, and the families deserve closure. We need to demand that this search happens. And if the provincial government's not going to do it, then the federal government needs to step in. They have the authority to do so. They just need to actually do it.
Yeah. One day after a blockade at Winnipeg landfill came down, a new camp went up in Winnipeg. The camp, known as Camp Mercedes, is located near the Canadian Museum of Human Rights and is named for Mercedes Myron, one of the 2 women whose remains are believed to be in the Prairie Green landfill outside of Winnipeg. We're set up at the Human Rights Museum because this is a human rights problem, so it's a good space for us, said Jordan Myron, the sister of Mercedes Myron. Lots of traffic goes through here, so they can see what's going on here and open their eyes. Those at the camp continue to protest the Premier's decision not to support a search of the landfill for the remains of Mercedes Myron and Morgan Harris. 2 women are believed to have been killed by alleged serial killer Jeremy Subicki. Subicki is... or Subicki. Fucking cares, man. Is also charged in connection with the deaths of Rebecca Pontos and an unidentified woman given the name of Buffalo Woman or Mesh Code Izuaki. Man, I'm so fucking terrible with names, man. By community members. In early July, a group of protesters set up a blockade outside of Brady Road landfill, where the remains of Pontus were located, and called for a search of the landfill. The blockade was in place for nearly 2 weeks before it was dismantled Tuesday. A feasibility study into the search of the Prairie Green landfill found it could cost up to $184 million, could take up to 3 years, and there was no guarantee of successfully finding the remains, which is a bunch of bullshit. The study also said it not doing a search would have a significant impact on the families of the victims. Premier Heather Stefanson said Manitoba would not support a landfill search, saying the province won't knowingly risk the safety of Manitoba workers. Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller has criticized Stefanson's decision, calling it heartless. Which, yeah, it is. Like, it is very... Oh, this is... Pretty much, like, watched this, man. It's the propaganda shit. A new flag with a message for the Manitoba Premier Heather Stefanson was raised Monday morning by protesters who continued to block access to the Winnipeg landfill in spite of the court injunction. Across the provincial flag, protesters painted the phrase "Heartless Heather" in black letters. It was attached to the top of a makeshift flagpole made from a stripped down tree. The reason for that would be denying these families justice, dignity, and the ability to grieve, said protester Marlene Burstein, who stood with other demonstrators blocking the main road to the city's Brady road landfill. Stefanson has said her government won't pay for a search of the Prairie Green landfill north of Winnipeg, where police believe the remains of 2 First Nations women, Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron, were taken last year. On July 6th, protesters established a blockade on the main road to Brady in response to her decision. More than a dozen remain there Monday, in spite of the interim court injunction that went into effect at 6 p.m. CT Friday. Manitoba Court of King's Branch Justice Sheldon Lunchbury said the protest is valid and can continue, but the roadway can no longer be blocked. The city must be allowed to operate to the landfill. In response, protesters burned a copy of the injunction at the blockade site. Melissa Robinson, Harris's cousin, says a second encampment will be set up at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights as early as Monday evening. They are more than excited to have us there. They know that there is a human rights issue. They stand with us. They support us. They want to see us there. So we're excited to be starting a second encampment to bring awareness, Robinson said at an Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs news conference on Monday. Robinson added that second added that second camp will be called Camp Mercedes in honor of Mercedes Myron. Demonstrator Dina Biscuit, right, says a number of things are planned as the group has no intention of going anywhere. A powwow is set to take place Monday with elders, while elders are conducting ceremonies, and Biscuit is arranging for some breading lessons so people can learn to bread, or some beading lessons so people can learn to bead red dresses. We want our community members to come out and just refocus on our culture, the healing ceremonies that need to take place on this land, she said. Lots have taken place here, and you can feel the energy shift since Friday. Binsky has also heard of other camps possibly being set up around the country in support of the blockade. She fully supports them. Let's continue to bring the energy and focus to this until this land gets searched and our girls get the proper burials that they deserve. The Winnipeg Police Service is authorized to arrest people who are in violation of the injunction. Police won't go into details about how they'll enforce the court order, but a spokesperson said in an email Monday that the intent is to achieve a peaceful resolution. I would be surprised if that actually happens. Like a peaceful resolution. Like, I have a feeling it might be. It might get bloody. Or not bloody. It might get violent. Demonstrators are being asked to abide by the injunction and leave the roadway. Robinson wouldn't say if the blockade would be taken down, but said the encampment will continue to stand. Camp Morgan at Brady is not going anywhere until our landfills are searched, she said. Harris and Myron are 2 of 4 victims of an alleged serial killer, police say. The others are Rebecca Contis and a partial remain who was found in Brady in June 2022. A fourth woman whose identity is not known and has been named Miss Code, or I'm so fucking indoctrinated into like white evangelical fucking, for that I'm so fucking bad with names, man. Or Buffalo woman. Police have linked her to the same alleged killer, though her remains have not been located. A protest encampment dubbed Camp Morgan has been set up near the landfill since December to bring awareness to the issue of murdered and missing Indigenous women. Stephenson has said her decision not to search Prairie Green is based off of safety concerns associated with sifting through toxic materials, as outlined in a search feasibility report. The federal government funded the feasibility study earlier this year to examine the logistics of searching the privately run Prairie Green landfill. The report from the study was completed in May and was still being reviewed by government when a copy was leaked at the end of June. The report warned there are risks due to exposure of toxic chemicals and asbestos. I thought we were done with fucking asbestos, man. And that a search could take up to 3 years and cost $184 million with no guarantee of success. However, it also said foregoing a search could be more harmful for the women's families. Asked Monday about the ongoing protest, the demands for the landfill for a landfill search, a government spokesperson said, Our hearts go out to the families who are dealing with unimaginable grief, but leadership requires difficult decisions." Oh. Always the same goddamn shit. There's no guarantee of finding remains, and immediate long-term health and safety risks are real and cannot be ignored. We must preserve the integrity of the justice proceedings, the spokesperson said in an emailed statement. Our government continues to offer support for the families and has offered to work with all levels of government on building a memorial to honor the victims. Yeah, okay. So, for those who don't know, or like maybe you do know, but Pierre Poilievre and Daniel Smith decided it would be a good idea to take some photos with someone with a lot of fucking reactionary white supremacist ideology. So let's take a look at that. It's not just Singh and it's not just Singh and Daniel Smith doing so. We also have another cabinet minister doing so, which we'll get into in a little bit.
You remember this guy, the guy who took the photo in the straight pride t-shirt with Pierre Poilievre?
So, Daniel Smith and Pierre Poilievre took a photo with a guy wearing a straight pride t-shirt, and yeah, they've been very critical. They've been criticized a lot for it, right? Understandably so. And they like I'm honestly not surprised by their response by this, because they said that they didn't read the shirt, which honestly, you know, we've seen how well, you know, conservatives can spell. I'm not surprised in the slightest that they don't know how to fucking read either. So, you know.
Daniel Smith, well, he had some things to say. He got tracked down for an interview later. And do you know what he said about Pierre Poilievre? He said, quote,
this is coming from the guy wearing the straight pride t-shirt.
He was the Donald Trump of Canada, but turns out he's just another leftist. Why did he say that? Well, because Poilievre didn't stand by him. Because this is how it works.
Wait, Pierre Poilievre leftist? Haha. Yeah, sure, okay. You reactionary psychos can fucking keep him. I don't want him.
The instant you don't comply with what they want, with their
because
hatred,
like he unironically looks like a fucking, like, ever since he like tried to change his new fucking appearance, he just looks like an AI generated conservative politician. Like, I'm not even joking about that.
with who they want you to turn against, they'll turn against you. This is the conservative cycle. They cozy up to the extremes to get into leadership, and then they try to pivot to the mainstream to try to win federal elections. In doing so, they alienate the extremes that they started out with. Those extremes feel betrayed and turn against them. This happened to Andrew Scheer, this happened to Aaron O'Toole, this is happening to Pierre Poilievre. Because there aren't...
Yeah. It's even happened to Harper to a certain extent as well, right?
Underlying principle. There is simply the pursuit of power. And they will say and do anything it takes to get into that position. And so they'll use people like this when it's convenient and then discard them when it's not.
Yep.
Seems like the RCMP is finally taking neo-Yahtzee.
Oh yeah, so some of the RCMP is actually I forgot about this, but some of the RCMP is actually taking charge on or like taking some action on white nationalism, right, and white supremacy within Canada. But like I'm more or less curious to see how long it's actually going to last, right?
Seriously, because for the first time ever, a man is being charged for being linked to a neo-Yahtzee organization. Patrick McDonald, who is 26, was arrested and is facing charges of participating in a terrorist group, facilitating terrorist activity, and willful promotion of hatred. This is the first time the RCMP has addressed the creation of propaganda for these groups. The name of the group that he was part of is literally the German word for atomic bomb, and they were designated a terrorist organization by the Canadian government years ago. And another person from a town
but
outside
But like when we also did do the same classification after the January 6th insurrection, it like with the Proud Boys and like I think the Oath Keepers and 3%ers as well, we haven't really done anything about them, right? And you know, Proud Boys have still been able to hold fucking rallies within Canada, right?
Out of Quebec was also arrested on the same day. Once again, this being the first case in Canada where somebody advocating a violent far-right ideology has been charged under Canada's terrorism laws. About time.
Yep,
the paradox
I
of
agree.
intolerance is that we cannot tolerate intolerance. And it's about time that the RCMP has finally started to take far-right white nationalist ideology seriously. Because, you know, the last time it got really popular, well, it didn't end well for people who looked different from me. And maybe, just maybe.
And I've also heard that fucking far-right ideology is on the rise in Germany too, so, you know, keep that in mind as well.
Even if you're white, you should feel empathy for people who are different than you. But I know some of you out there struggle with that.
Oh yeah, this is... So... one of the... what the hell was his name again? Josh Raj Singh, a cabinet minister of in the Conservative caucus in the House of Commons, also is, you know, not looking too great. So let's take a look to see what he's been doing. He's been doing some really fucked up things, man. On there.
More anti-LGBTQ rhetoric from conservative MPs, this time from a front bench shadow cabinet member. Let's talk about it. Josh Raj Singh was seen taking a photo with people wearing shirts that said, "Leave our kids alone." And these people were specifically protesting teaching about sex and gender in classes. And when reached out for comment, Pierre had nothing to say. Don't worry, Pierre, I got this for you. I know exactly what you want to say. Because Pierre's the kind of guy who would vote against gay marriage being legalized in Canada even while his gay father was sitting in the House, a thing that actually happened. And these photos come after Pierre pointed
like that actually did happen, right? Like people don't, you know, remember that, but you know, it happened. It did.
Danielle Smith were also seen taking a photo with a man wearing a hateful shirt. The anti-LGBTQ rhetoric is strong in the Conservative Party. Oh, but it's just a shirt. The guy wearing the shirt in the photo is facing a charge of hate-motivated criminal harassment. Yeah, it's just a shirt being worn by a dude who is...
Yeah, it's the exact same thing when conservatives have one of their fucking psychopathic right-wing idiots go off and do a mass shooting, or in the instance of the Waterloo stabbings, and be like, oh no, he's not one of ours, despite the fact that, you know, in his manifesto, he's had a bunch of fucking right-wing figures, or figureheads within his manifesto, and like literally name-dropping them. Yeah, he's totally a fucking lone wolf. Like, come on, bro.
Literally charged with a hate crime. And he says he believes that the federal Conservative Party supports his message being against the LGBTQ community.
Because they do.
Specifically because of Pierre's recent comments about the policy in New Brunswick. If you didn't know, in New Brunswick, they basically made it illegal to call a kid under the age of 16 by their chosen name or chosen pronouns. And when Trudeau said that he disagreed with the policy, Pierre's response was to tell Trudeau to butt out and leave the provinces alone and let parents raise their kids. Meanwhile, when teachers use a child's chosen pronouns or name, it can actually reduce the risk of suicide. But
Yeah,
Pierre doesn't
he's literally right about that. Like we have discussed that on the broadcast before, right? Like, you know, using preferred pronouns as well as gender reaffirming care or hormone blockers can reduce, you know, suicide within those groups up to, I think it was what, 98%, right? So, you know, just, you know, they say, like, you know, keep her or leave her kids alone, but like when it comes down to like how their kids actually want to be treated, you know, they're like, yeah, no, we're gonna intervene here and be like, you can't fucking do that. Despite the fact that, you know, it's not always the fucking safest thing in the world for children to do that at home, because if they have like very, 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 very conservative parents, they could either like, you know, like get a lot of fucking violence towards them, whether it be like physical or emotionally, you know, whatever, or they could be kicked out of the house. Because guess what? You know, straight people who identify as straight and cis do not get thrown out of the house for being straight and cis. That just doesn't happen, right?
care if gay kids kill themselves. He doesn't even care if his father was able to get married. So let's go back to why Pierre's office hasn't said anything about this issue. It's because regardless of what the average conservative voter believes, Pierre's hardcore base, the people who will come to bat for him, the people who will sing his praises and yell about him and leave nasty comments in his video, they're anti-LGBTQ. They're homophobic. They're transphobic. They hate gay people. They hate queer people. They also most likely hate minorities, which makes this whole thing very ironic. And no, that's not all conservatives. I am just talking about Pierre's base, because conservative voters are better than what the Conservative Party is offering up right now. But that won't stop a lot of them from voting for a guy who hates
to a certain degree, yes. To a certain degree, some conservative voters are better, right? But a lot of those voters ended up voting either NDP or Liberal, right? Because they see the direction that the Conservative Party is going, right? But you'll always have those who are like, you know, will support fucking the conservatives to like to the bitter end, right? Like my writing, for example. Everyone knows about that. So yeah. Fucking read it, man. I want to read this fucking article. Fucking hate that.
In case you needed another reminder of just how little Canadian Conservative politicians care about the housing crisis in our country, Nova Scotia's Minister of Community Services has an update for you. You see, Carla McFarlane was asked about the number of tents emerging in public parks in Halifax, and she insists that it's fine. It's just a natural love of camping. You see, it's the natural evolution.
I forgot about this. Like I read this article. Fuck. How did I forget about this? Yeah, no, this was completely psychotic shit. Like, oh, everyone's just everyone's just going camping and having a fun old time with it. No, people are fucking setting up fucking, you know, tents and everything because they can't afford fucking housing or rent.
Of summertime in her mind. Quote, we always see tents increase. Quote, I think it's just a lot of individuals are looking for that outlet and freedom to be outside, much like ourselves. But we take this issue extremely serious. We know it's not a good situation. She thinks people living in tent encampments are just camping, that they're just out taking a leisurely time in the park. No. There are at least 940 people in Halifax without permanent homes. Those people aren't all just simultaneously passionate about camping. This is appalling. This is somebody who doesn't care and doesn't take the situation seriously.
Yep.
This is just a total dismissal of the problems people face and a total abdication of responsibility. And if you want to see just how arrogant and smug her response is, let's see the tape.
I'm reading articles all the time about this time of year seeing more tents. And again, I think it's just a lot of individuals are looking for that outlet and freedom to be outside, much like ourselves.
Yeah, like it's so fucking psychotic, right? Okay, let's
And they said.
let's take a look at fucking Pierre Poilievre's new look. Like he moved on from the Milhouse look from The Simpsons to the AI generated conservative politician look.
It couldn't be done.
Pierre Poilievre's style has been consistent for years, including navy blue suits and prominent eyewear.
It's common sense.
So the new look is notable.
My wife says I look better without glasses, so I have to keep her happy, first and foremost.
I don't know. I don't even know
While
about
that
that
may
one.
be, the change coincides with his party's lackluster performance in recent by-elections. And it's not just the clothes. Well, no.
Like the only by-election that, you know, he actually fucking like won, but it was like pretty much a lock-in to begin with, was the Portage Leslier by-election. Because like we already knew Brendan Leisure was going to win that, right? Like no shot fucking Maxime Bernier was going to win that. And anyone who thought that Maxime Bernier was going to win that is fucking ridiculous. But like it doesn't really matter because like the PPC and the Conservatives at this point are pretty much just the exact same party. The PPC are just more mask off than the Conservatives are, right?
Known for sparring with reporters.
We have basically a liberal heckler who snuck in here today.
The leader took questions about his image revamp in stride.
Whether or not I wear glasses, I have the best vision for the country.
He's not the first politician to go through a makeover. As Reform Party leader, Preston Manning scrapped his Coke bottle glasses, and Poilievre's predecessor, Aaron O'Toole, started running and took to fitted black t-shirts in campaign material.
You can't fatten a pig on market day. You can't do everything at the last minute. You can't suddenly become the perfect version of yourself weeks before an election.
This conservative strategist says the timing of the change is where Poilievre is trying to succeed where others have failed. The pivot coming well before the next expected election.
Close-up? Yeah, there's a close-up here. I mean, bro. If I can... Yeah, he looks like he looks like an AI generated conservative, but he also looks a lot like Milhouse without his fucking glasses on. Like I see no difference here.
For the public to get used to it, and the leader as well.
It's scary. It's scary to go out and not be in your formal battle dress of a suit and tie and glasses and speak to the public in your casual clothes.
This Ottawa insider has trained politicians on image and media. She says Poilievre's trying to win over skeptical voters with a softer touch.
You can't just win with the base. It's got to get bigger than that.
Poilievre's hammered the
Yeah, but like I don't think his new look is going to fucking change anything, to be perfectly honest with you.
Minister on inflation and foreign interference. It hasn't moved the needle. The Tory.
He kind of reminds me of like fucking Velma when he lost his glasses, or when she lost her glasses, right? What happened to my glasses? Like, I don't know why it's so much fun to shit on him.
Tories hope the new image can help their leader trade up to a new job.
I don't
JP
think so.
Tasker, CBC
No
News,
shot.
Ottawa.
No shot. I already think that it's going to be another liberal minority government. Like, no shot. It's not, right?
Let's bring in.
All right. So, CTV did a one-on-one with Danielle Smith. So let's also take a look at that. I want to see how fucking psychotic she's going to be.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith for more on this. Hi, Premier. Thank you so much for making the time today.
My pleasure.
So we just heard there Premier Heather Stephenson mentioning a message that we heard repeated throughout the past 3 days, that the premiers want the federal government to respect the jurisdiction of the provinces and territories. But when it comes to infrastructure, they're also calling for a national approach. So how would that work? What's the message to Ottawa?
Well, there are areas of constitutional jurisdiction that do fall to the federal government. Anytime you're building cross-border infrastructure between not only the Americans, but also between our provinces, whether it's rail lines or roads or transmission lines, but pipelines, ports, those are things that fall into federal jurisdiction. And we've fallen behind, quite frankly. We have a huge export market, a continuously growing economy, and yet we've seen just how much it can disrupt the entire country when one port is shut down. So we need to be proactive in finding more ways to get our goods.
She is doing the fucking anti-labor, anti-union talking points. Oh no, this is not going to go good.
Market, it means something different for each of the provinces.
Probably going to
There's
have a
different
fucking
routes and
aneurysm from this.
priorities. And that's why we were able to all agree that the federal government's got to help us come to the table and develop a strategic plan so that we can get all of our products to market.
All right, turning to healthcare, and I do want to get back to something that you're mentioning there with the port workers strike. But before we get to that, healthcare, of course, a huge issue in this country. Many ER doctors are speaking out about what they're calling a crisis in your province and your province's hospitals. What is your government doing specifically to address that issue?
Bro, who the fuck still uses wired headphones? Who uses that? Like, no shot you don't have money to buy, like, you know, fucking AirPods. Like every other, like, financial weirdo that they get on these programs. Like, come on, that's so fucking... What is going on? Come on, man. Yeah, like, no fucking shot you don't have enough money for that, right?
A lot. I mean, not only did we sign a 10-year agreement with the federal government, but we have also made historic investments into healthcare. And we're starting a restructuring as well. It was the first thing that I realized when I first got elected, is that year after year after year, we see that our hospitals have not been able to manage surge capacity when they've got an influx of patients during respiratory virus season, and that's not acceptable. So what we had to do is work on reducing the hospital wait times, work on reducing wait times for ambulance, and start expanding the capacity to do surgery so that we can eventually clear that surgical backlog. We're making great progress. Our official administrator who installed to do this work tells me that we should be able to have our backlog cleared by March of next year. So I think that I know people are impatient. I'm impatient, but it's the reason why we had to get started. And sometimes these things, they do require money, they do require investment. Sometimes they just require listening to the front line and implementing their ideas and getting better practices. And so we're going to keep on making those improvements.
Right, and when it comes to listening to the front lines, I understand that the premiers also had a meeting with nurses the other day. They were outlining their concerns, setting limits on the number of hours that would be considered safe for nursing staff or hospital workers to continuously work. That's one of the recommendations. What kind of recommendations are you planning on implementing from them?
There's a couple things I want to take a look at from what I've seen in other jurisdictions. One thing I learned is that Alberta has the lowest number of nurses who are prepared to work full-time. Only 36% of nurses are working full-time, which means the others are part-time or casual. And that's an indication, I think, that we haven't created an environment to work in, that people want to work those full-time hours. So is there some way that we can incentivize that? That would be one thing that I would want to have a look at. The other thing that we haven't done a very good job of, and I would say that this is a collective problem, is making sure that there's a pathway for mentorship and growth as a person enters into the medical profession.
Yeah, but like, what the fuck have the premiers done about that, though? Like, literally nothing. That's what they've done about it.
Starting as a nursing aide and then being able to do on-the-job training or micro-credentialing.
Because, like, a lot of it comes down to you know, there's no room for growth within the sectors, right? They, you know, you're trying to privatize sectors so that people get paid less, whilst increasing profits for for-profit clinics, right? It's just fucking ridiculous.
They become an LPN.
As well as, like, you know, you're not providing any form of, like, you know, free education for those that want to become doctors, nurses, etc., right?
And then a registered nurse, and then a nurse practitioner. We need to have more pathways for more people to be able to work in the full scope of practice. A final thing too, and we met with the Pharmacy Association, and they said that Alberta really is a leader in this, in finding new primary care options, allowing pharmacists to prescribe drugs and provide some basic primary care.
If that is the case, then why are so many doctors, nurses, and other practitioners within the medical field leaving Alberta for other provinces, like, say, BC, for example, right?
This is going to require an all-hands-on-deck approach, making sure that every health professional is fully engaged, and that's what we're working on with our new health minister.
Okay, I could continue talking about healthcare with you even longer, but we do want to move on to the BC port worker strike. You are, of course, one of the voices who have been calling on the federal government to take action on it. Reportedly, both of the sides in the dispute have received the terms of a settlement recommended by a federal mediator. So this was the move that the federal government has made so far. What do you make of the response we've seen from the federal government on this issue?
Well, I'm pleased that we're at this point now, but it's been 12 days. I mean, when the Port of Montreal was closed, that was one day before they realized it would be too catastrophic and people had to get back to work. They stepped in very quickly to make sure the WestJet strike was averted, as well as...
the WestJet strike. Fuck, I forgot about that.
So to have this linger on for 12 days has been incredibly disruptive, because the Port of Vancouver... Really
I wanted to cover the WestJet strike, but I would... You know, things got way too busy last week. That fucking sucks. I really wanted to do it.
Really does provide the gateway for Alberta, for Saskatchewan, and for Manitoba. I'm hearing about potash being scaled back, mining and developments having to scale back, gasoline and diesel production as well in our own home province. As well, that's bad enough, but the perishables, pork products and fresh produce, like this is very serious for our producers, because the longer that these items sit on a dock waiting to be put onto the tanker, or sit on the tanker waiting to be off.
This is also coming from the person who had to sell her fucking small business restaurant. So, like, you know, take what she says with a grain of salt. And like that literally no one wanted to buy either, which is also really funny.
Offloaded, you end up with spoilage and you end up losing markets. So I've been told that it can take as long as 2 to 5 times the amount of time for the shutdown to get everything back to normal. I would have liked to have seen this earlier. I'm hoping this signals the end of the dispute, but the federal government really does have to do a better job of being proactive on these matters. Ports are essential services, and we have to make sure that we avert these kinds of disasters in the future.
Okay, and just finally here, something that was in the headlines this week is that you've said you support the LGBTQ2S+ community. You were recently photographed with a man at the Calgary who was wearing a shirt that said "Straight Pride." Pierre Poilievre was also photographed with that man. You said you didn't read the shirt and don't agree with this message. So do you think that this is a hateful message on his shirt?
As I said, I support the LGBTQ community. And I think that you often see that there are people who want to take pictures with politicians as a billboard for their political message. I don't support the message. I know that most other politicians...
Come on, bro. That's so disingenuous. Like, we've seen what you guys have fucking done. You know, we've seen you and fucking Millhouse, you know, take pictures with the exact same guy who's, like, literally being charged for fucking, like, hate crimes. And then you also have, what the hell was his name? Jack Raj Singh. That was his name, right? taking, you know, photos with individuals who was wearing, you know, Stop Grooming Kids shirts. So, like, you know, it's the kind of demographic you guys want to have around.
We go into photo lineups, we're meeting people, we're taking hundreds of pictures. You just don't have time to read every single t-shirt. So I'll be more mindful, and my staff will be more watchful in future. But I think we need to make sure that the LGBTQ community feels supported, and that's what I've always done.
All right, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right, before I go, there's one thing that my friend shared with me that I think is fucking awesome. My friend showed me or shared this with me. It's fucking great.
Always wanted. So I hear there's a bitter rivalry between the two of you as to who's the best character in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Is it Nia? No. Is it Poppy? Ugh. Is it Tora? Meh. Meh. You know there's only one answer, brat. It's always been the answer. Mithra!
I fucking love it.
This message sends you off with a smile.
He peeked the mic. I didn't know he peeked the mic. Oh. For those who don't know, that is the voice actor for Malos in Xenoblade 2. That just made me so happy that that he did that. It was once he sent that to me, I laughed so hard. So yeah, I guess with that, that's where we'll end things for today. So yeah, there was a lot of, like, I have no idea what's going on with conservatives, man. They're going off the deep end. And so yeah, tomorrow there might not be stream, which kind of sucks because I want like to stream something, but I think I'll be gone for a vast majority of the day. I'm probably going to spend some time with my mom and grandma as well. So we'll see. So probably do something on Saturday though, for sure. So until then.